If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 351, The Great Night. Emma's eyes widened in alarm. Harry! What's happening? She cried, her voice trembling. Beside her, Fleur pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart pounding as Harry's body began to radiate an eerie, otherworldly glow. The air around him crackled with static, and a soft light pulsed beneath his skin, as though his veins had turned to liquid starlight. Harry gritted his teeth against the waves of pain tearing through his muscles, but his voice stayed oddly calm. "I think this is it," he murmured, his eyes blazing with sudden clarity. The next stage. A searing heat coursed up his spine, forcing him to stagger as his transformation began to take hold. An undeniable change was unfolding inside him. The seed of life dormant since his ascension to knighthood after the battle with the basilisk finally stirred to life again. It felt as though it had sprouted, releasing a second wellspring of power that pulsed in perfect harmony with the magic already flowing through his body. Bit by bit, this fresh source of energy expanded throughout his body. It wasn't merely amplifying his strength, it was rebuilding him from within. His bones grew denser, his muscles tighter and more efficient, each cell transforming into something far superior. The wounds and bruises from his brutal battle began to vanish. Gashes knit themselves together seamlessly, and fractures mended as though guided by invisible, divine hands. His body, broken moments ago, was now remade into a form worthy of his ascension. Harry's senses sharpened dramatically. He could hear the rapid thumping of Emma's and Fleur's hearts, each beat distinct and clear despite the distance. The lingering scent of ozone from his lightning spells reached his nose, vivid and crisp. He felt the tiniest tremors rippling through the ground beneath his feet and sensed the multi-layered wards surrounding his house as if they were tangible walls he could touch. The night-breathing technique he had spent years mastering took on new meaning. With each breath, he didn't just draw in air, he inhaled pure life force. The potent energy shaped itself to his will, molding his body and spirit into something far beyond anything he had ever been before. Lightning crackled across his skin, not the usual manifestation of his spells, but rather the physical evidence of his transformation. The very air shimmered with power, forming a vortex of energy that lifted him a few inches off the ground. In the electric haze, Harry's magical connection grew stronger than ever. The Elder Wand vibrated faintly in his grasp, while Gryffindor's sword pulsed in sync with the energy coursing through him. Both legendary artifacts seemed to resonate with his ascension, as though acknowledging his new status. The transformation reached its peak as Harry unleashed a raw, primal roar that tore through the night. It carried the weight of his trials, the triumph of surpassing his limits, and the fierce joy of victory. A shockwave of pure magic burst outward from him, rippling across the battlefield. The oppressive smoke and ash vanished in an instant, and the stubborn flame snuffed out, leaving the air crisp and clear. When the energy finally settled, Harry stood motionless, breathing heavily, as the profound changes sank in. His body, once riddled with wounds, now felt whole, lighter yet immeasurably stronger, as though the very concept of limits had been stripped away. It wasn't just that his power had grown, the very essence of his magic felt deeper, sharper, and more intertwined with the natural world around him. He became aware of two distinct streams coursing through him. One was purely magical, cultivated through years of wizardry. The other was raw, vital energy radiating from the awakened seed of life. They flowed together but remained distinct, each amplifying his capabilities in unique ways. For the first time, Harry realized he could manipulate both forces independently, granting him abilities that had been beyond him as a knight. A final wave of warmth surged through his body, and then stillness. He exhaled, a faint mist escaping his lips into the cool night air. Though exhaustion still lingered, it no longer felt like a burden. His body, once ragged and torn, now brimmed with vitality, strength, and completeness. Turning his gaze toward Emma and Fleur, Harry saw the astonishment shining in their eyes. They stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sheer power radiating from him. The magical aura surrounding him was palpable, like a living force that both awed and intimidated. "The transformation is complete," Harry announced, his voice low but resonating with newfound authority. "I am now a great knight." Meanwhile, at the Ministry of Magic, the sound of running footsteps echoed through the Ministry's vast, empty atrium as Charles Potter sprinted after Magnus, his wand clutched tightly in his trembling hand. Rage and grief fueled every step, the haunting image of Remus collapsing replaying in his mind like a cursed memory. The atrium, usually alive with bustling witches and wizards, was eerily silent. The polished dark wood floor mirrored the golden symbols drifting lazily across the peacock blue ceiling, casting a surreal glow over the space. The fountain of magical brethren stood at the center, its golden statues solemn and unmoving, silent witnesses to the confrontation about to unfold. Magnus came to a halt near the fountain, turning with an air of calm menace. His dark robes, singed from the earlier battle, hung loosely around him, and his cold smile deepened as he saw Charles approach. "Foolish boy," Magnus drawled, his wand hanging casually at his side. "Running straight into my trap. Just like your parents so predictably, Greyfinder." Charles leveled his wand at the German wizard, his voice trembling with fury. "What did you do to Remus? What was that spell?" Magnus' smirk widened, his eyes gleaming with wicked amusement. "Worried about the werewolf, are you?" he mocked, his tone dripping with false pity. "You should be more concerned about yourself. After all." He paused, savoring the tension. "You're not the chosen one we believed you were, The words hit Charles like a physical blow, but he refused to let them show. "That doesn't matter," he hissed through gritted teeth. "You hurt Remus, and you'll pay for it." The German wizard's laughter echoed off the atrium's walls. "Oh, this is delightful," Magnus said, his voice rich with mockery. The false chosen one, still clinging to his little hero act. "How quaint!" His expression hardened, malice radiating from him. "Allow me to show you what true power looks like." The first spell came without warning. Magnus' wand moved in a blur, sending a sickly purple curse hurtling toward Charles's chest. Charles dove behind the fountain just in time, the curse shattering the golden wizard's arm with a deafening crack. "Expelliarmus!" Charles shouted, but Magnus deflected the spell with a lazy flick of his wand. "Is that all the great Charles Potter knows?" Magnus sneered, circling the fountain. "Schoolyard spells against a real duelist." Charles clenched his jaw, his fury mounting as he unleashed a barrage of spells. Stupefy. Impedimenta. Reducto. Each incantation came faster than the last, a display of the training he had honed under Dumbledore's guidance. But Magnus moved with deadly precision, dodging each spell with unnerving ease. His counterattack was brutal, a flurry of curses that forced Charles to abandon his cover. The fountain exploded behind him, shards of gold flying in every direction. Charles rolled to his feet, blood dripping from a gash on his cheek where debris had struck. "Conf Ringo!" he yelled, the blasting curse forcing Magnus to step back, his shield charm barely holding. Magnus smirked. "Better," he admitted, his tone mocking. "But not good enough." What followed was less a duel and more a lesson in dominance. Magnus' experience as a hardened dark wizard overwhelmed Charles's courage and skill. Every spell Charles cast was met with a swift, devastating counter. A cutting curse slashed across Charles's leg, sending him stumbling to the ground. Before he could rise, a bludgeoning hex slammed into his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. His wand slipped from his grasp, clattering across the polished floor. Magnus loomed over him, twirling his wand with cold amusement. "The Dark Lord wanted you alive," he mused, his voice dripping with disdain. "But now that we know you're not the chosen one, perhaps I should save him the trouble. After all, you're nothing but another blood traitor." Charles tried desperately to crawl toward his wand, but Magnus pressed a heavy boot into his back, pinning him to the ground. "So much for the great Charles Potter," Magnus sneered, lifting his wand. "Any last words, false hero?" Before Charles could reply, the air around them shifted, crackling with sudden, intense magic. A blinding chain of spells rapid and precise struck Magnus from behind, flinging him across the atrium. He slammed into the far wall with a sickening thud, collapsing unconscious to the floor. A calm, authoritative voice broke the silence, sharp and steady. "One would think," it said, "the world would have learned by now, never to harm those under my care." Chapter 352, The Battle of the Atrium. A heavy silence filled the ministry atrium as Albus Dumbledore stepped forward. The midnight blue fabric of his robe swayed gently, as if caught in an invisible breeze. He stood tall and dignified, but the signs of his failing health were unmistakable. His right hand hung blackened and withered at his side, while his left clutched his wand tightly, the strain evident in his grip. Dumbledore wasn't the type to strike an opponent from behind, but he knew he no longer had the strength to fight as he once could. His injuries, combined with the battle ahead, forced him to act in ways he usually wouldn't. This wasn't about pride, it was about survival. "Professor!" Charles called out, his voice filled with relief as he stumbled forward. Blood trickled down his face, and his leg dragged awkwardly from the curse Magnus had cast. Dumbledore reached out with his good hand, steadying him as he approached. "Are you hurt, Charlie?" Dumbledore asked softly, his voice kind despite the tension in the air. His sharp gaze flicked over the boy's wounds, concern etched into his face. "I'm fine, sir," Charles replied, panting as he struggled to stand upright. "But Remus, that wizard used some kind of horrible curse on him." Dumbledore gave him a small, reassuring nod. "Remus is being cared for," he said calmly, though the weight of worry in his voice was hard to miss. His sharp eyes studied Charles's tired expression. "We'll speak later, but now." Before he could finish, a cold, cruel laugh rang out, cutting through the stillness of the atrium like a blade. The temperature dropped sharply, and an unnatural wind swirled around the room. Shadows twisted unnaturally, and the air seemed to grow heavier. Out of a swirling cloud of darkness stepped Lord Voldemort. His pale, snake-like face twisted into a wicked grin, and his glowing red eyes glinted with malice. "How touching," Voldemort said mockingly, his voice smooth but cold. "The great Albus Dumbledore, hurrying to save his precious pupil." Dumbledore shifted, moving to stand in front of Charles protectively. His wand lifted in a calm but ready position. His face was composed, though a flicker of sadness passed over his features as he looked at Voldemort, the man who had once been Tom Riddle. "Tom," Dumbledore said softly, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. "I knew it wouldn't be long before you revealed yourself." What followed was a duel that would be remembered as the stuff of legend. Voldemort struck without hesitation, his wand carving through the air as he unleashed a series of deadly green killing curses. The emerald light bathed the atrium in an eerie glow, casting long, ghastly shadows across the polished floor. Dumbledore moved with practiced precision, his wand flicking in a fluid motion. The golden statues of the Fountain of Magical Brethren sprang to life, leaping in front of the curses. Each impact sent shards of molten metal flying, the enchanted figures reduced to puddles of gold under the sheer power of the dark magic. But Dumbledore was already a step ahead. His wand moved in an elegant, intricate arc, transfiguring the pools of molten gold into a hail of gleaming daggers. The razor-sharp blades shot toward Voldemort with deadly intent, their edges glinting ominously in the dim light. "Impressive," Voldemort sneered, his voice dripping with mockery as he countered. With a casual wave of his wand, he conjured a whirlwind of black flames. The inferno devoured the daggers mid-flight, reducing them to harmless wisps of smoke. Voldemort's triumphant grin widened as he shaped the dark flames into a colossal serpent of fiend fire, its burning jaws snapping hungrily as it surged toward Dumbledore. Dumbledore remained unfazed. With a commanding motion, he summoned a powerful surge of water from the very air around him. The liquid vortex met the fiery beast in a clash of elements, steam exploding outward in a blinding wave that filled the atrium. The air turned thick and heavy, the billowing mist obscuring both combatants from view. Through the dense fog, flashes of spell fire lit up the space like lightning in a storm. Red, green, and violet streaks zipped through the mist, colliding with thunderous force. The marble walls of the atrium bore the scars of their duel, charred craters and cracks spreading like a spider web under the relentless assault. Voldemort's gaze flicked to Dumbledore's blackened, lifeless hand, and understanding lit up his crimson eyes. But instead of triumph, irritation flashed across Voldemort's features. Dumbledore's awareness of his Horcruxes meant his secrets were compromised, and that made the stakes of this duel even higher. Determined to end it quickly, Voldemort surged forward, his attacks intensifying. A barrage of curses erupted from his wand, the spells so swift they blurred into a single deadly chain. His voice cut through the chaos, laced with venomous delight. "Your reflexes are fading, old man," Voldemort taunted, his tone sharp and mocking. "How much longer can you keep this up?" Dumbledore did not answer Voldemort's taunt. Instead, he pressed on, though the truth of his worsening condition was plain to see. His cursed, blackened hand hung limp at his side, leeching his strength with every passing moment. Still, he fought with breathtaking creativity, the veil of steam shimmered into crystal prisms at his command, scattering and multiplying his own attacks so Voldemort had to defend on every side. The Dark Lord snarled in frustration, his patience wearing thin. He stomped hard on the polished marble floor, sending out a dark shockwave that cracked the stone like a spider's web. Dumbledore reacted instantly, rising into the air to avoid the jagged fractures threatening to ensnare him. Yet, in that moment, Voldemort seized the opening. A violet curse slashed through the mist, grazing Dumbledore's shoulder. The spell tore through fabric and flesh, leaving a deep, bloody gash in its wake. First blood! Voldemort roared triumphantly, his crimson eyes gleaming with malice. Sensing the advantage, he thrust his wand forward, unleashing a wave of black, crackling chains. The writhing tendrils of dark energy shot toward Dumbledore, snapping and wriggling like vipers hungry for their prey. With a pained flick of his wand, Dumbledore transmuted the dark chains into a flurry of wilting rose petals, but the counter lacked its usual potency. The curse on his hand sapped him further, forcing him to exert ever more effort with every new spell. Yet his face stayed composed, his spectacles reflecting a hidden fierceness in his gaze. Time and again, their magic clashed in dazzling explosions. Dumbledore's creativity remained unparalleled, turning debris into shields, shaping barriers from swirling air, and molding the mist into haunting illusions to confuse his foe. But Voldemort's attacks came with unrelenting ferocity, each spell a testament to the dark power he had amassed through decades of forbidden experimentation. His magic was raw, brutal, and warped, battering against Dumbledore's defenses like an unstoppable tide. The turning point came without warning. Voldemort split his magic into 3 simultaneous attacks. A deadly green killing curse shot straight toward Dumbledore. At the same time, a wave of destructive energy rippled across the shattered marble floor, threatening to engulf him from below. From above, sharp shards of poisoned ice rained down, glinting menacingly in the faint light. Dumbledore had only seconds to react. His choice was clear. With a decisive movement, he conjured a shimmering shield at Charles's side, deflecting the lethal green curse aimed directly at the boy. In doing so, he left himself vulnerable to the other attacks. The combined force of the blast struck Dumbledore like a hammer blow. Though he managed to redirect some of the impact, the sheer power was too much for him to withstand in his weakened state. He was hurled backward, his wand slipping from his grasp and skidding across the floor, far out of reach. He crumpled to his knees, his once pristine blue robes now torn and bloodied, his breath coming in ragged, uneven gasps. Voldemort advanced slowly, his crimson eyes blazing with cruel satisfaction. His thin lips curled into a mocking smile as he loomed over the fallen headmaster. The legendary Albus Dumbledore, he sneered, his voice dripping with venom, brought low by a curse of his own making. Did you truly believe I wouldn't recognize the signs of my own magic slowly tearing you apart from the inside? Dumbledore, though bloodied and weakened, lifted his head with calm defiance. His voice, though quiet, carried an edge of piercing clarity. Was that curse prepared for me, Tom? Voldemort's laugh echoed through the ruined atrium, cold and mirthless. No, Dumbledore. Even I didn't think you would be foolish enough to touch dark artifacts without care. It was an experimental curse, something I tried in my youth. I never imagined someone like you would fall prey to it. He smirked, tilting his head. And yet, here you are. With a sweeping motion of his wand, Voldemort obliterated the remaining pieces of the Fountain of Magical Brethren. The golden fragments scattered across the floor, clattering hollowly against the broken marble. The once proud symbols of unity witch, wizard, centaur, goblin, and house elf lay in ruins, their shattered remains reflecting the broken state of the wizarding world's greatest defender. How fitting, Voldemort mused, his voice soft but menacing. Your fall mirrors the fall of everything you stood for, Dumbledore. Unity, hope, all crumbling into nothing. Before Voldemort could savor his triumph further, the heavy double doors at the far end of the atrium burst open with a deafening crash. Figures poured into the room, the Order of the Phoenix arriving en masse. Mad-Eye Moody led the charge, his magical eye whirring as he surveyed the devastation. With him came James and Lily Potter and the other members of the Order. Behind them followed Sirius Black, Amelia Bones, and nearly a dozen Aurors, their wands drawn and faces grim with determination. Charles's friends trailed closely, their eyes wide with shock. The sight that greeted them stopped them in their tracks, Dumbledore, bloodied and kneeling on the shattered floor, wandless and gasping for breath. Around him, the atrium lay in ruins, its polished marble cracked and scorched, the once glorious fountain reduced to rubble. And towering above the fallen headmaster stood Voldemort, triumphant, his malevolent presence dominating the room. For a moment, the group seemed frozen in place, the weight of the scene pressing down on them. The air was heavy with the oppressive aura of dark magic, and the devastation before them made it painfully clear how dire the situation had become. Chapter 353, The Chosen One Revealed. The tension in the atrium was suffocating. A heavy silence blanketed the room, thick with unspoken dread. The members of the Order of the Phoenix and the assembled Aurors formed a cautious circle around Voldemort, their wands raised but hands unsteady. Each movement was slow, calculated no one dared to be the one to set him off. At the center of it all stood Voldemort, triumphant, towering over Dumbledore's kneeling form like a dark god presiding over his fallen adversary. The polished marble beneath them was cracked and scorched, a battlefield marked by the weight of destruction. Wands trembled in white-knuckled grips, but no one moved. They were waiting for the first spark that would ignite another war. Charles emerged from the shadows, his movements sluggish with exhaustion, his injured leg dragging slightly behind him. His heart clenched at the sight of Dumbledore, the man who had always been like a grandfather to him, bloodied and kneeling before the Dark Lord. "What will be your next move? Fight, or surrender?" Voldemort's voice slithered through the chamber, cold and sharp as a blade. His crimson gaze flickered over the assembled fighters, amusement curling in his tone. "Your leader is down. You stand no chance against me. I would rather not waste more pure blood if I do not have to." Sirius scanned the situation, his mind racing through 100 possible outcomes. None of them ended well, not while Voldemort had Dumbledore at his mercy. "We can't risk it," Amelia Bones muttered under her breath, standing near Sirius. Her usually sharp eyes were wide with concern, her wand steady but her voice laced with frustration. "If we act recklessly, he'll kill Albus before we can even blink." Sirius's expression tightened. Even in his disagreements with Dumbledore, he would never allow the man to be sacrificed. And if he tried to do so, the others would never forgive him. A single bead of sweat trickled down his temple. "We need a miracle." A sudden groan from the far side of the ruined fountain shattered the tense silence. All eyes snapped toward the crumpled figure of Magnus Blutriac, Voldemort's fallen general. With a pained grimace, he struggled upright, one hand clutching his bruised ribcage, the other gripping a cracked golden statue for support. Voldemort's wand remained unwavering at Dumbledore's throat, but his cold, piercing gaze flickered toward Magnus. "Magnus," he barked, his tone laced with irritation. "What happened in the Hall of Prophecy? Your task was simple: get the boy to retrieve the prophecy and bring it to me. How could you fail?" Magnus winced, exhaling sharply before straightening as best he could. "My lord, everything was going according to plan," he rasped, "but when the boy tried to take the prophecy orb from the shelf, he couldn't touch it." The statement hung in the air, a sharp, unsettling note in the already fragile tension. The soft drip of water from the shattered fountain was the only sound that followed. Voldemort's expression darkened, his grip on his wand tightening. "What do you mean?" A bitter chuckle escaped Magnus' lips, though it was more pain than mirth. He lifted his gaze to Voldemort, the weight of failure dragging down his features. "Charles Potter is not the child prophesied to fight you, my lord," he admitted, his voice hollow. "The prophecy orb was keyed to H. Potter Hadrian Potter. The elder son, not the younger." The atrium erupted into stunned silence. Every pair of eyes turned to Charles, who stood frozen in place. Lily's voice, barely above a whisper, cut through the silence like a blade. "What does this mean?" Magnus let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "It means your precious chosen one isn't chosen at all." He gestured vaguely at Charles, his voice laced with cruel amusement. "The prophecy never referred to him. It was marked for the boy you abandoned. You sent away the wrong son." The words landed like physical blows. James staggered as though struck, his face draining of color. Lily's hand flew to her mouth, years of choices and consequences crashing down around her. "No." James's voice came out hoarse, almost desperate. That can't be possible. You're lying." Charles swallowed hard. "No, father," he said, his voice raw with emotion. "He's telling the truth." A bitter, broken chuckle escaped him as he turned his gaze downward. "The prophecy, it's between Harry and Voldemort. It always was." A shudder coursed through Dumbledore's weakened form. He did not speak for several moments, but when he did, his voice was quieter than it had ever been, full of something deeper than regret. "All this time," he murmured, his eyes closing as though trying to block out the painful truth. "I made a mistake. I separated a family, for nothing." Voldemort let out a soft, almost thoughtful hum, a cruel smirk tugging at his lips. "Well," he said, his voice emotionless. "This changes everything." Amidst the shock and horror, one man stood tall. Laughter sharp, defiant and triumphant cut through the stunned silence. Sirius Black's bark of amusement rang out across the ruined atrium, his grin widening as he turned to face Voldemort directly. "Yes, it changes everything," he said, his voice brimming with fierce satisfaction. But not in your favor, Voldemort. No, this changes everything for us. The Dark Lord's crimson eyes flickered with irritation, but Sirius pressed on, his wand steady at his side. While the entire wizarding world was busy pinning their hopes on Charles, my godson Harry was learning the true value of strength. Unlike most children his age, he didn't spend his days chasing bugs or daydreaming about Quidditch. No, from the moment he understood the world was cruel, he started training harder than anyone. And because of that, my godson has grown stronger than you could possibly imagine. Voldemort's expression twisted with disdain. You think a boy barely past his childhood can challenge me? Lord Voldemort! Sirius's grin only widened, his gaze glinting with something dangerous. You already know how strong Harry is, don't you? He tilted his head mockingly. You could have faced him at Azkaban a few months ago, if you hadn't chickened out, Tommy boy. A flicker of rage darkened Voldemort's expression at the mention of his hated Muggle name. The tension in the air thickened, magic crackling between them. You dare mock me? Voldemort hissed, his voice like venom dripping from a blade. Sirius smirked, unfazed by the Dark Lord's fury. Yes, I do. And why wouldn't I? My godson should be arriving any moment now. His tone was almost casual, but his words carried weight. He would have been here already, but we did get some rather interesting intel about a certain army of yours sneaking into the country. So, Harry thought it best to use the extra time, to take out the trash. Voldemort stiffened. Sirius's words explained what had been nagging at the Dark Lord's mind. He had planned for his forces to storm the Ministry alongside him, but things had unraveled too quickly. No messages. No reinforcements. No reports from Greyback. His crimson eyes narrowed slightly. That's why. Just as Voldemort began reassessing his next move, the air above Dumbledore erupted in a fiery burst. A piercing cry filled the atrium as Fawkes appeared in a dazzling flare of golden light, his brilliant wings illuminating the ruined battlefield. Before Voldemort could react, the Phoenix's talons clutched onto Dumbledore's robes. In another burst of flames, they vanished, reappearing behind the Order's defensive line. Moody and another Elder Order member stepped forward instantly, steadying the weakened headmaster. Voldemort's expression darkened further. His moment of triumph had slipped through his grasp. Freed from the immediate threat to Dumbledore's life, the tension in the atrium shifted. No longer forced into cautious hesitation, the circle of witches and wizards surrounding Voldemort and Magnus tightened, their wands gleaming in the flickering light. The tide had turned. Sirius's lips curled into a sharp, predatory grin, his grey eyes flashing with anticipation. He lifted his wand in one swift motion, unwavering in his stance. Your hostage is gone, Voldemort, he declared, his voice ringing through the chamber. It's time to end this. A low, simmering rage radiated from Voldemort like heat from a dying star. The very air trembled with his fury, crackling with the static charge of unrestrained malice. His crimson gaze burned with the promise of death. You wanted to anger me, didn't you? Voldemort hissed, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a brewing storm. You've succeeded. And because of that, none of you will see the sunrise. I will ensure it. Sirius let out a short, humorless laugh, rolling his shoulders as though shaking off tension before a duel. Says the wizard who's outnumbered and outmatched. He twirled his wand between his fingers, the smirk on his face never faltering. You know, my godson and I spar often. The last time we trained together, he told me I had the strength to battle you. Sirius leveled his wand, his stance shifting into one of readiness. Let's see if he was right. His grin widened, sharp as a blade. Think of this as a warm-up. A taste of what you'll face when you finally meet Harry. The witches and wizards around them wasted no time. Aurors and Order members moved into formation, well-rehearsed strategies falling into place with practiced ease. Amelia Bones barked swift orders, her Aurors responding in perfect synchronization. They tightened their defensive flanks, cutting off every possible escape route. The tension in the air solidified into something palpable, something electric, the air charged with the anticipation of battle. The final confrontation was at hand. Chapter 354, Author's Note. Hey everyone! So, it's official, the book is done. While the story has already concluded on my Patreon, I know web novel is 13 chapters behind. To buy myself enough time to plan the next novel, I'll be releasing the remaining chapters one at a time as usual over the next 13 days. This will help me wrap up this journey properly and give me the space to prepare for what's next. If you'd prefer to read the remaining chapters quickly and support my work, you can check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/talesbyjazz. An apology. First off, I want to apologize for not being very active on Web Novel. I haven't been reading comments or reviews here. I could offer plenty of excuses. Juggling a full-time job, life, and writing this novel took up most of my time, but they're just that, excuses. The truth is, I wasn't very confident in my writing when I started. I was afraid that reading the comments would make me second-guess every choice I made. So, I chose to stay away from feedback and focus on finishing the story. Along the way, I grew more confident and realized I didn't need to justify every decision. True fans would enjoy the story for what it was. That said, I did peek at the comments from time to time. I saw many of you defending my story on my behalf, and for that, I'm deeply grateful. Just to clarify, I don't have a second account, and I haven't replied to any comments. But I did enjoy reading your debates and theories. Now, I've come to understand that feedback is essential for me to improve. I've become more confident in my writing and am ready to engage more actively. For my next book, I'll do my best to read and interact with you all. I want to grow as a writer, and your input will help me get there. Help me decide the next story. Now, it's time to look ahead to the next book, and I need your help to decide what to write next. I have two ideas. 1. A Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, fanfic. This story would follow a regular Earthling who uses his knowledge of the movies to grow and become powerful, exploring different corners of the MCU universe along the way. 2. Another Harry Potter fanfic, but with a twist. This time, it would feature an original character, OC, who teams up with the girl who lived. It would start during the Goblet of Fire year at Hogwarts, but after that, they would leave school to travel the world, grow together, and eventually return for the final battle. It's a big undertaking, but I think it would be fun to imagine and write. Personally, I lean toward the MCU idea, but since most of you found me through this Harry Potter FIC, I'm not sure which direction you'd prefer. Maybe, if I keep improving, I can write both at the same time. No promises, though juggling a full-time job and this hobby is tough. Still, with AI getting better, who knows? Maybe I can write and edit faster than before. Ask me anything. For this chapter, note, I'll be answering as many comments as I can. Ask me anything. Whether it's good or bad feedback, I'll do my best to respond and learn from it. Let's use this as a practice round for the next book. Thank you. Finally, a huge thank you to all of you for sticking with me through the ups and downs. Special thanks to those who went out of their way to find my Patreon and become members. It meant more than you could ever know. Your support kept me going when things got tough. I'll need 1 or 2 weeks to plan and prepare the next book. Once that's done, we'll meet again with a brand new story. Until then, take care, and I'll see you soon. Cheers. Tales by Jazz. Chapter 354, The Marauder's Last Stand. Sirius stepped forward, placing himself at the front line while the others positioned themselves to provide support. His wand was steady in his grip, his stance balanced and prepared. Across from him, Voldemort stood motionless, eyes gleaming with malice, his skeletal fingers curling around his wand as if savoring the battle to come. The Dark Lord struck first. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a jet of dark purple energy crackling through the air. The spell howled as it tore toward Sirius, splitting the very air with its malevolent power. Sirius sprang sideways, just as the curse blasted into the already shattered fountain behind him, reducing it further to smoldering rubble. The acrid scent of scorched stone filled the air. Without missing a beat, Sirius retaliated, flicking his wand sharply. Reducto! He bellowed, sending a concussive blast hurtling toward Voldemort. A shimmering black shield materialized instantly, absorbing the blast with eerie ease. Voldemort barely flinched. The battle erupted into a relentless exchange of magic. Sirius's style was bold, aggressive, and unpredictable. He darted across the battlefield with the fluid grace of a seasoned duelist, dodging and weaving between spells while launching his own with rapid precision. His movements were almost playful, reckless yet impossibly precise. His wild, free-spirited nature was reflected in every twist, every feint, every unexpected counter. "Come on, Tommy!" Sirius taunted, deflecting a particularly nasty curse with a well-timed protego. "Harry hits harder than that during warm-ups." A muscle in Voldemort's jaw twitched. His crimson eyes flared with fury at the name. His response came in the form of a spell chain so rapid that it left ghostly after images in the air. Dark curses streaked toward Sirius in a seamless wave, each one lethal enough to end the fight in an instant. But Sirius was ready. His wand was a blur, parrying and countering every spell with uncanny speed. He matched Voldemort move for move, his grin widening at the sheer thrill of the duel. The spectators could only watch in stunned amazement. The Order had always known Sirius was a powerful wizard, but this was something else entirely. His raw skill, his reaction speed, the sheer power behind his spells, it was unlike anything they had seen from him before. Impossible, Lily whispered, her hands clenched at her sides as she watched her former friend duel on par with Voldemort. When did Sirius become this strong? Amelia, her eyes fixed on the battle, answered without looking away. He's been training with Harry. If you ever saw their mock duels, you'd think this was normal. The atrium became a battleground of titanic forces. Magic twisted the very fabric of the air. Marble pillars shattered into dust only to be reconstructed mid-explosion. Elementals, conjured by both duelists, crashed into one another, blazing infernos clashing against waves of liquid shadow, electrified air meeting stone golems. The sheer force of their magic warped the light itself, distorting reflections against the ruined walls. Sirius was holding his own, but that did not mean he was as strong as Voldemort. He had become formidable, but Voldemort, even weakened from the destruction of his Horcruxes, was still one of the most dangerous wizards to have ever lived. Is that all you've got? Sirius called out, his voice dripping with mock disappointment as he sidestepped another deadly curse. I thought the curses of a Dark Lord would have burned my wand to cinders by now. Voldemort's patience snapped. His face twisted into something monstrous, his anger finally overriding his cold precision. He hurled a series of green bolts laced with pure, unfiltered death magic. Each one sizzled with lethal intent, cutting through the air with the promise of instant destruction. Sirius ducked, twisted, and deflected the attacks, his wand work flawless. The energy from the spells collided with the pillars behind him, reducing them to crumbling debris. Stone rained down, the ground trembled under the force of their battle, but neither wizard faltered. The duel raged on, magic shaking the very foundation of the Ministry. And through it all, Sirius Black laughed, reveling in the fight. For several minutes, the battle raged on, neither combatant giving an inch. Their clashing spells sent deafening shockwaves through the vast atrium, shattering what little remained intact. No one else dared to interfere. The sheer intensity of their duel made even the most seasoned Aurors hesitate. The magic they wielded was too volatile, too deadly. A single misstep could mean disaster for anyone caught in the crossfire. But as the fight dragged on, Voldemort's decades of accumulated dark magic and ruthless experience began to tip the scales. With a cunning flick of his wand, he cast a feint, an arc of searing blue flame. Sirius, anticipating a more direct attack, dodged too early. It was exactly the opening Voldemort had intended. A powerful concussive blast followed in the split second of vulnerability, striking Sirius square in the chest and sending him skidding across the scorched floor. He rolled with the impact and scrambled back to his feet almost instantly, but his breath came harder now, his chest rising and falling in sharp gasps. Voldemort's next curse was faster. A second hex clipped Sirius in the shoulder, the dark magic scorching through the fabric of his robes. A sharp, searing pain shot down his arm. Sirius clenched his jaw, gripping his wand tighter even as his fingers trembled slightly from the hit. You always liked cheap shots, hey? He spat through gritted teeth, forcing himself upright. No wonder your nose fell off. Voldemort's crimson eyes flared with fury. His thin lips curled in utter contempt. I will flay that insolent tongue from your mouth, Black. With a sweeping motion, he unleashed a hurricane of cursed fire. The inferno spiraled through the air in a violent coil, twisting like a living creature as it lunged for Sirius. Sirius reacted fast, conjuring a shimmering shield of silver light, but even as it deflected the flames, it flickered unsteadily under Voldemort's relentless force. The strain showed in the lines of pain etched across Sirius's face. Not bad, Black, Voldemort sneered, his voice dripping with cruel amusement. He stepped forward, pressing the attack. But not good enough. The Dark Lord's wand lifted for what looked like a finishing blow. Magic coiled at the tip, dark and crackling with lethal intent. Then, before he could strike, Pad Foot! A familiar voice rang across the battlefield. James Potter lunged forward from the gathered ranks, wand already raised. His mind was clear. This was not the time for guilt, for drowning in the weight of past mistakes. Sirius was in danger. That was all that mattered. A barrage of spells shot from James's wand, streaking toward Voldemort's flank. The sudden attack forced the Dark Lord to abandon his finishing move and twist defensively, breaking the rhythm of his assault. "It's about time, Prongs." Sirius coughed, shaking off the pain as a grin spread across his lips. "Thought you were just gonna stand there and let me have all the fun." James fell into a ready stance beside him, his hazel eyes gleaming with fierce determination. "Can't let you hog the spotlight," he shot back. A flicker of recognition of old camaraderie passed between them. This was how they had fought at Hogwarts against bullies, how they had trained in the Order's early days. Back to back, united by the shared mischief that had given birth to their marauder nicknames. Dash! With renewed confidence, Sirius launched a rapid-fire volley of hexes, forcing Voldemort to defend high. At the same moment, James aimed low, sending a twisting curse into the ground. Chunks of marble erupted like jagged spikes, nearly catching the Dark Lord's legs. Voldemort snarled in irritation, swiping his wand downward to shatter the incoming debris. The two marauders pressed their advantage, their attacks perfectly synchronized. They moved in a rhythm that only came from years of fighting together, quick, fluid, and relentless. Now Voldemort was on the defensive. Sirius and James called out old code words from their Hogwarts days: stag sprint, Mooney's cloak, signals for feints, misdirection, and precisely timed counters. The synergy between them was effortless, like two dancers in perfect step, weaving illusions and spell chains that kept Voldemort guessing. For the first time in decades, the Dark Lord found himself at a disadvantage. Sirius flicked his wand, sending a Langlock curse that nearly sealed Voldemort's mouth shut, forcing him to twist aside to avoid it. James took the opening, firing a blasting curse that grazed Voldemort's robes, scorching the fabric and eliciting a furious snarl. In retaliation, the Dark Lord erupted with an aura of crackling black fire, forcing them both to step back. But it was clear the combined force of the marauders was pushing him backward. Across the atrium, Magnus, bloodied, furious, and desperate, tried to leap to his master's aid. But before he could take a step, a gruff voice barked, "Not so fast, lad." A flash of bright blue light struck Magnus square in the chest, sending him sprawling. Mad-Eye Moody, battle-worn and unyielding, strode forward, wand leveled. Magnus hissed and tried to rise, but another barrage of hexes rained down on him. The Aurors had closed ranks. Amelia, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and the others tightened the perimeter, ensuring he had no way of reaching Voldemort. Dash! Back in the heart of the battle, Sirius and James executed a final, cunning pincer move. Voldemort barely saw it coming. A flash of red light slammed into his chest, sending him hurtling backward. His body crashed against a massive, cracked pillar, shattering its base. Fragments of marble tumbled down around him as he collapsed in a heap, dust swirling in the eerie silence that followed. For the first time, Lord Voldemort lay still. The atrium held its breath. James and Sirius stood panting, their wands still raised. Then, ever so slowly, Sirius turned to James, his lips quirking in exhilaration. "Is that it?" he panted, chest rising and falling heavily. James steadied him, his own face breaking into a wild grin. "Did we just?" The realization spread like wildfire. Around them, the Order and the Aurors erupted into cheers. For the first time, hope blossomed in their ranks. The impossible had happened. Voldemort had fallen. But then came the footsteps. They echoed through the atrium like rolling thunder. Each slow, deliberate step sent a ripple of cold dread through the air. Shadows thickened unnaturally, stretching and twisting along the floor, as if the very darkness itself was answering a summons. James felt at first a deep, instinctive chill in his bones. His exhilaration turned to unease. And then, somewhere in the crowd, a whisper. "Gellert Grindelwald." The name spread like wildfire, spoken in hushed disbelief. And then he appeared. Gellert Grindelwald strode into the atrium, his elegant robes swirling around him, moving as if caught in a phantom breeze. He radiated effortless dominance. His sharp, piercing gaze swept over the battlefield, his face unreadable but his amusement was unmistakable. Behind him came his elite guard, dark wizards handpicked and trained by the Dark Lord himself. Their silver masks gleamed under the dim light, and their wands were already drawn. Grindelwald came to a stop, tilting his head slightly as he took in the scene before him. "I hope," he said, his voice soft, thick with an old accent and amusement, that I haven't missed all the fun. Voldemort let out a ragged breath. Slowly, with visible effort, he pushed himself upright from the rubble. His crimson eyes gleamed with something that was not quite gratitude, but rather the satisfaction of a long-expected arrival. You took your time, he rasped, brushing dust from his ruined robes. Grindelwald smirked, his gaze flicking briefly over the shattered remains of the atrium before settling back on Voldemort. Better late than never, he drawled. Shall we repay these fine people for their hospitality? The atmosphere in the room shifted. What moments ago had been victory now felt like the prelude to disaster. The Order and Aurors braced themselves. Their wands were ready, their expressions steeled. But the presence of Grindelwald himself changed everything. The real battle was only beginning. Chapter 355, A Reunion in Darkness. A hush fell over the ruined Ministry atrium, heavy and thick with dread. Victory, so briefly tasted, now turned to ash in their mouths. Gellert Grindelwald had arrived, and with him, the chilling realization that the battle had only just begun. Through the dust and debris, Albus Dumbledore pushed himself to his feet. His once magnificent robes hung in tatters, stained with sweat and magic, but his eyes fierce and unwavering held steady. Though his limbs ached with exhaustion, he ignored the pain. His focus was fixed on the figure standing at the opposite end of the hall. Gellert Grindelwald. I'll handle Gellert, Dumbledore said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. Focus on the others. Around Dumbledore, chaos reigned. Sirius and James, their faces still flushed with the heat of battle, continued their desperate dance with Voldemort, forcing the Dark Lord to yield momentarily. The Aurors and Order members clashed with the freshly arrived minions, shadows of dark intent that swarmed the atrium like living nightmares. But all eyes shifted toward the center of the carnage as Dumbledore squared his shoulders to meet his old adversary. At the center of the shattered hall, two titans stood face to face. Dumbledore and Grindelwald. For a single, breathless heartbeat, everything paused. Grindelwald's sharp, piercing gaze raked over Dumbledore, a smirk playing at his lips. You look terrible, old friend. His thick accent curled around each syllable, rich with mock concern. Prison has been kinder to me than time has been to you. Dumbledore's response was swift and merciless, not in words, but in magic. Always so direct, Albus, Grindelwald chuckled, his eyes gleaming with amusement. The air itself rippled and warped as an intricate chain of spells erupted between them, twisting reality in ways that defied comprehension. Dumbledore did not hold back. Blazing arcs of light surged toward Grindelwald, raw, untamed power encased in the finest precision. Grindelwald answered in kind, his own magic forming elegant patterns of shadow and silver flame, curving and bending to intercept the onslaught. Their spells met in the center of the battlefield, colliding with such force that the ground shook beneath them. Between flashes of magic that shattered the space between them, their words struck deeper than any curse. Remember Paris, Albus. Grindelwald's voice cut through the roar of battle, laced with a strange nostalgia. The charm we perfected by the Seine. Dumbledore's expression tightened, his wand moving in a defensive arc. Some memories are best left buried, Gellert. His counterspell was stark and powerful, a blast of pure force that aimed to shatter Grindelwald's delicate creation. Buried. Grindelwald laughed, a mirthless sound. But Albus, our past is the foundation of everything we are now. Don't tell me you've forgotten the dreams we shared, the world we were going to build, together. A stunned silence fell over a section of the battlefield as those words hung in the air. Whispers rippled through the Order and Aurors. Dumbledore and Grindelwald, allies? Dreams shared? It was a revelation that shook the very foundations of what they thought they knew. Dumbledore ignored the murmurs, his focus solely on Grindelwald. You twisted those dreams, Gellert. You turned them into nightmares. I remember the promises, the hope, and the betrayal. I remember locking you away, thinking it was the only way to save us all. His voice was heavy with regret, with the weight of years of loss and disillusionment. A bitter chuckle rumbled from Grindelwald as he deflected the attack, the light casting eerie shadows across his face. And I remember the taste of that betrayal. His smirk deepened, but his eyes burned with something raw and unspoken. The agony of imprisonment. The chains. The silence. For the first time, his voice lost its mockery. It was something deeper now, a whispered fury, a wound never healed. I felt every lash of injustice, every cut of your righteousness. Another spell, deep violet, twisting like smoke, left Grindelwald's wand, nearly breaking through Dumbledore's defenses. But the old wizard stood his ground, his voice calm and unshaken. "Now here we stand," Dumbledore said, lifting his wand once more. Old friends turned bitter foes. The air around them grew heavy with the weight of their shared history, and even as their spells rent the space between them, the whispers of the past spread like a chill among the onlookers. Dash. As the duel raged on, the truth became painfully clear: Dumbledore was losing. His legendary prowess, his centuries of wisdom and skill, all of it was undeniable. But he was old. He was wounded. The cursed blackened flesh of his arm drained him with each movement, feeding on his strength like a parasite. And Grindelwald was relentless. Every spell the dark wizard cast came with a precision honed over decades, a deep, intimate knowledge of his opponent's weaknesses. He was not fighting to overpower Dumbledore, he was dismantling him. And it was working. Seeing Dumbledore falter, Mad-Eye Moody, ever vigilant, roared, "Albus! Need a hand, old friend?" Without waiting for an answer, Moody launched himself into the fray, firing a barrage of hexes towards Grindelwald, forcing the Dark Lord to divide his attention. For a brief moment, the combined assault of Dumbledore and Moody pushed Grindelwald back, but the respite was fleeting. Grindelwald, with a casual wave of his wand, unleashed a spell of raw, untamed power. A blast of dark energy slammed into Moody, sending him flying backwards, crashing into a marble wall with a sickening thud, leaving him slumped and motionless. With Moody neutralized, Grindelwald turned his full attention back to Dumbledore. He pressed his attack relentlessly, a storm of dark spells raining down on the aged headmaster. Dumbledore fought with every ounce of strength he possessed, his wand a blur of motion, but it was no longer enough. A cutting curse, swift and precise, sliced across Dumbledore's chest. He gasped, stumbling back, his hand flying to the wound, blood blooming dark against his once pristine robes. He swayed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The battle around them seemed to fade into background noise as all eyes focused on the two legendary wizards. Grindelwald advanced slowly, deliberately, towards the fallen Dumbledore, a triumphant smile playing on his lips. He stopped before Dumbledore, who knelt on the shattered floor, his head bowed, his chest heaving. Grindelwald tilted his head, studying Dumbledore with an almost clinical interest. "It seems, Albus," Grindelwald said softly, his voice almost gentle, "that time catches up to us all." He knelt down, his movements fluid and elegant, and reached out, his hand hovering over Dumbledore's blackened, cursed arm. "Ah," Grindelwald murmured, his eyes widening slightly with understanding. "Voldemort's little experiment. Quite ingenious." He looked up at Dumbledore, his smile widening, now edged with something cruel. "To think, Albus Dumbledore, brought low not by my hand, but by a curse of your own curiosity." He traced the blackened veins on Dumbledore's arm with a finger, a cold, possessive touch. "You know, Albus, for decades, I've imagined this moment. Imagined the satisfaction of seeing you broken, defeated. After all those years in that cold, lonely cell, inflicted by you." Grindelwald's smile deepened, his eyes gleaming with a chilling satisfaction. "And in a way, it seems Voldemort has granted me a twisted form of justice. To know that you are suffering, that you are in pain, because of a curse you couldn't control, it warms me in a way you wouldn't believe." With a sudden, sharp movement, Grindelwald's wand flicked. A pulse of dark magic shot from its tip, striking Dumbledore's cursed arm directly. Whatever subtle magic had been slowing the curse's progress, whatever fragile barrier Dumbledore had erected against its spread, vanished. Agony contorted Dumbledore's face. He cried out, a raw, guttural sound of pure pain that tore through the atrium. The blackness on his arm began to spread, tendrils of darkness racing up his veins, consuming his flesh with terrifying speed. His body convulsed, his breath hitching in ragged gasps. Horror washed over the faces of the onlookers. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. James's face was a mask of grim despair. Sirius, still dueling with Voldemort, glanced towards Dumbledore, his heart plummeting. He fought with renewed desperation, his spells flying faster, fiercer, a silent prayer echoing in his mind, "Harry, where are you?" Suddenly, the Floo network roared to life. Emerald flames burst into existence, illuminating the shattered remains of the atrium. All eyes turned. A figure stepped through. Ally or foe? The battlefield held its breath. Chapter 356, The Marked One arrives. Emerald fire erupted in the Ministry atrium, the sudden burst of light cutting through the gloom and drawing every eye. From the swirling green flames, 3 figures emerged, one after the other. Harry Potter stepped out first, his expression calm, almost serene, despite the chaos surrounding him. Behind him came Fleur Delacour, her silver hair gleaming in the magical light, and Emma Foster, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They had arrived swiftly through the Flow in Bones Manor, a shortcut bypassing the Ministry's compromised public entrances. Their arrival brought the ongoing battle to a standstill. Without masks to hide their identities, everyone could see who had joined the fray. Harry moved forward with an almost regal confidence, his presence alone shifting the very air in the atrium. The power emanating from him was undeniable, amplified from what it had been before, deeper, more focused, a honed weapon ready to be unleashed. Relief washed over Sirius like a tidal wave. He watched his godson stride into the atrium, a palpable aura of power radiating from him. A genuine smile broke through Sirius's battle-grim expression. With Harry here, the tide would turn. He could feel it. Harry had changed, grown stronger, a force to be reckoned with. "What took you so long, Harry?" Sirius called out, a touch of playful exasperation in his voice, masking the immense relief he felt. "You missed the exciting parts. It's been a night of ups and downs, to say the least." Harry's gaze swept across the ruined atrium, taking in the scene in an instant: Dumbledore kneeling in agony, Grindelwald standing triumphant, Voldemort still locked in combat with James and Sirius, the scattered Aurors and Order members. His eyes lingered for a moment on Dumbledore, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face before he turned back to Sirius. "Sorry, Padfoot. Had to take care of some pests who intruded my house. They've been cleared now." Voldemort, his red eyes narrowed, paused in his spell casting, his attention snapping to Harry. "Pests?" he hissed, the word dripping with venom. Harry's gaze flicked to Voldemort, a hint of steel entering his voice. "I may be talking about a group of dark creatures who thought it would be a great idea to knock on my door while they waited for their lord's calling." Voldemort's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Fenrir? Vladimir?" The names were spat out, laced with disbelief and dawning fury. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Harry's lips. "I saw them off to their next great adventure." Voldemort's face contorted in rage. His carefully constructed plan, his alliances, crumbling around him. But Grindelwald, ever the composed strategist, stepped forward, his piercing gaze fixed on Harry. "So," Grindelwald drawled, his voice echoing in the sudden lull in the fighting, "you are the child prophesied to defeat Voldemort." Harry met Grindelwald's gaze unflinchingly. "Maybe," he replied, his tone deliberately ambiguous. Sirius blinked, turning to Harry in surprise. "Harry, you're not surprised you're the prophesied child?" Harry shook his head, his expression calm. "No, Padfoot. I knew from that very Halloween night." Voldemort's head snapped towards Harry, his snake-like face a mask of disbelief. "What? How?" Harry's gaze flickered towards Voldemort, a hint of something akin to pity in his eyes. "That night, you didn't mark Charles. I was in front of the crib, although I was under an invisibility cloak. I took the death curse. I was the one marked that night, not Charles." Lily's breath hitched in her throat. Why didn't you tell us?" Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a dawning horror. Harry's gaze hardened, turning towards his parents. "I thought it would be foolish to reveal it to everyone, to put a target squarely on my back." Hermione, her brow furrowed in confusion, spoke up. "But, the target was put on Charles." Harry sighed, a weariness that belied his age settling upon him. "I didn't want a target on Charles's back either, Hermione. If the adults here remember correctly," his gaze swept over the assembled order, pointedly lingering on Dumbledore's slumped form, "that night, I made sure to give credit for Voldemort's defeat, for everything, to Grandma. To Euphemia Potter. To ensure no one had a target on their back. Our family, all of us, could live in peace, not constantly looking over our shoulders, worried about Death Eaters." He paused, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "But no. The great Albus Dumbledore, for some reason, wanted fame. Wanted to put Charles on a pedestal. And you too." He turned his gaze fully on Lily and James, his voice laced with bitter disappointment, "his parents, you went along with it. Fools." Moody, despite his own injuries, pushed himself upright, his magical eye whirring, fixed on Harry. How old were you then? 3? 4? Thought this much? There was a hint of grudging respect in his gruff voice. Yes, Harry replied, his tone unwavering. I was always intelligent. Grandma asked me to protect Charles that night, and I tried my best that night to keep him safe. Had these fools not sent me away to the Muggle world, he gestured towards his parents and Dumbledore with disdain, I would have kept doing just that. But no, again, the great Dumbledore had some weird reason for sending me away to the Dursleys. Lily and James stood with their heads bowed, shoulders slumped, the weight of Harry's words crushing them. Dumbledore remained kneeling, lost in his own agony, beyond the reach of Harry's accusations, beyond saving. Harry could see it now, the curse had taken too much hold. Voldemort, desperate to grasp at any straw, seized on a detail. No, he spat, shaking his head. You were born in October, right? The prophecy says the child should be born as the 7th month dies. A flicker of hope ignited in his red eyes. He clung to the prophecy, to the idea that Harry couldn't be the one. Charles, that he could handle. Harry raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement flickering in his gaze. It just said the 7th month dies, Tom. It didn't specify which calendar. He tilted his head, a faint smirk playing on his lips. You lived in the Muggle world for some time, right, Tom? You should know there are a lot of calendars in the Muggle world. I'm sure in one of them, my birthday falls at the end of the 7th month. He shrugged dismissively. But who cares about semantics? What matters is, I can and will vanquish you. His voice dropped, becoming low and resonant, filled with a quiet, unwavering certainty that sent a chill down Voldemort's spine. Prophecy or no prophecy? A charged silence descended upon the shattered atrium, heavy with the unspoken promise of retribution, the air thick with the raw, untamed power about to be unleashed. Chapter 357, The Night Unleashed. A hush fell, thick with anticipation, as Harry raised his wand. Everyone, stand back, his voice resonated through the shattered atrium, calm yet carrying an undeniable command. Let me handle this. He stepped forward, leaving Fleur and Emma slightly behind, his gaze sweeping over the assembled dark forces Grindelwald, Voldemort and the masked ranks of their followers. As Harry stepped forward, a soft white light began emanating from his skin, unlike any magical aura they'd seen before. It pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost alive, creating a barrier that casually deflected stray spells and debris without Harry even acknowledging them. What is that light? Lily breathed, her voice a hushed whisper, her eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and a profound, aching regret for the son she barely knew. Sirius, however, just grinned, a flash of pure, unadulterated pride lighting his features. That's what happens when you don't waste time playing favorites with your children, Lils. But if Harry heard their exchange, he gave no sign. His focus honed in on the assembled enemies Grindelwald, Voldemort and the masked ranks of their followers. The ancient lore of the Knight's Path was lost to most, and few, if any, would realize the significance of the white glow protecting him. Ever since Harry ascended to Great Knight, his very life energy had merged with his raw magical abilities, raising him to a level of power unknown in modern times. However, this was no time for sword fighting. Tonight, the sword remained sheathed. Tonight was about magic pure, overwhelming magic. Wand held loosely, almost casually, in his hand the elder wand remaining discreetly concealed for now Harry moved. And then, the ruined atrium became the stage for a symphony of magic, a breathtaking display of power that shattered all previous notions of what wizardry could be. Casting speed became a blur, a near-invisible dance of his wrist and fingers. Spell after spell ripped from his wand tip, a torrent of pure, focused power. Crimson jets of light slammed into masked figures, throwing them back against shattered pillars, instantly stupefied. Blinding flashes of gold erupted, Expelliarmus charms disarming opponents before they could even react. Waves of emerald green, not the killing curse, but powerful binding magic, snaked through the air, ensnaring groups of dark wizards, tying them together in writhing, magically reinforced bonds. The masked figures, Grindelwald's elite and Voldemort's Death Eaters alike, fell like dominoes. They were skilled, dangerous, but they were facing a force operating on an entirely different plane. Harry moved through them like a tempest, a whirlwind of pure magical energy. He was everywhere at once, spells erupting from his wand in a dazzling, overwhelming display. Merlin's beard, Moody rasped, his magical eye spinning wildly in its socket, struggling to track the sheer velocity and complexity of Harry's spell patterns. I. I've never witnessed anything remotely like this. He's taking down their entire army, single-handedly. Whispered an awestruck Auror, his eyes wide with utter disbelief. James and Lily watched, mouths agape, as their son moved with a grace and power they could scarcely comprehend. Charles, standing slightly behind them, stared, a complex mix of awe and something akin to fear flickering in his eyes. Sirius, however, simply grinned, a wide, proud, almost feral expression. "That's my godson," he murmured to Amelia Bones, who stood beside him, equally stunned. In what felt like mere heartbeats, the ranks of masked figures were utterly decimated. Heaps of stunned wizards lay scattered across the ruined atrium floor, disarmed, bound, completely neutralized. The furious chaos of moments before had been replaced by a stunned, almost reverent silence, broken only by the crackling echoes of spent magic. Now, only two figures remained standing against Harry Gellert Grindelwald and Voldemort. They exchanged a swift, almost imperceptible glance, a silent communication passing between the two Dark Lords. Then, they moved in unison, turning their combined might against the young wizard who had so effortlessly dismantled their army. Two streams of dark magic, one elegant and precise, the other brutal and raw, converged on Harry. Grindelwald unleashed a torrent of silver fire, each flame burning with chilling intensity, while Voldemort followed with a barrage of bone-shattering curses, each spell a promise of agonizing pain. But Harry was ready. He met their combined assault head-on, his white aura flaring brighter, deflecting the brunt of their attacks. His casting remained impossibly fast, spells whipping from his wand in a counter-offensive that was breathtaking in its speed and ferocity. He parried Grindelwald's silver flames with shimmering shields of pure energy, then retaliated with bolts of lightning, crackling whips of elemental force that forced Grindelwald to weave and dodge with surprising agility for his age. Against Voldemort's curses, Harry unleashed a barrage of shield breakers, spells designed to shatter dark magic, forcing Voldemort onto the defensive, his sneering face tightening with frustration. "Impossible!" Grindelwald spat, his usually smooth accent thickening, cracking with raw fury. No one is supposed to possess this level of power." "Actually," Sirius called out cheerfully, a booming voice of unrestrained glee echoing through the stunned silence, "my godson is. And trust me, Gellert, Tommy boy, you haven't even seen him at full strength yet." James watched his eldest son with a mixture of pride and profound regret. Every spell, every movement, showed years of dedicated training that should have happened under his guidance, not in spite of his absence. The atrium had transformed into a dazzling, terrifying spectacle of pure magical combat. Harry, bathed in that enigmatic white light, moved with a fluid, almost ethereal grace, his spells precise, devastatingly powerful and breathtakingly varied. He was not merely defending, he was relentlessly attacking, systematically pushing back against two of the most formidable dark wizards in recorded history, and against all odds, against all expectations, he was unequivocally, undeniably winning. Voldemort and Grindelwald fought with desperation now, realizing they were facing an opponent far beyond their initial estimations. They combined their efforts, coordinating their attacks, trying to overwhelm Harry with sheer magical force. But it was like trying to break a dam with pebbles. Harry's casting speed was simply too fast, his defenses too strong, his attacks too relentless. He weaved through their spells as if he could anticipate their every move, countering their every offensive with a perfectly timed defense and a devastating riposte. Finally, with a decisive surge of power, Harry unleashed a twin volley of spells. A bolt of pure white light, imbued with stunning force, slammed into Grindelwald, catching him off guard and sending him flying backwards, crashing into the remnants of the Fountain of Magical Brethren. Simultaneously, a wave of concussive force, invisible but immensely potent, slammed into Voldemort, knocking the Dark Lord off his feet, his wand flying from his grasp to skitter across the marble floor. Silence descended once more, heavier this time, absolute. Harry stood in the center of the ruined atrium, his chest rising and falling slowly, the white glow around him dimming slightly but still present. Grindelwald lay sprawled amidst the golden rubble, unconscious. Voldemort, dazed and disoriented, sat slumped on the floor, wandless and defeated. That's it. Someone whispered in utter disbelief, the voice barely audible in the charged silence. He beat them both? Just like that. Harry had done it. He had subdued them both. And he had achieved the impossible in front of the assembled Order of the Phoenix, a contingent of battle-hardened Aurors, witnesses. Witnesses to his awe-inspiring, overwhelming power, but also, crucially, witnesses to his restraint. He hadn't killed. He had merely subdued. He had won the battle, but what now? He couldn't kill Voldemort or Grindelwald in cold blood, not here, not now. He would be hailed as a hero by some, perhaps, but also branded a vigilante, a dark wizard himself by others. The Wizengamot, still riddled with dark sympathizers, might very well see this as an opportunity to bring him down, to imprison him. Azkaban loomed, not for Voldemort, but potentially for him. Fugitive status, endless pursuit. The thought was infuriatingly absurd. Amelia Bones stepped forward, her monocle gleaming. "Harry, what are you planning to?" Before she could finish, the atrium's fireplaces began lighting up one after another, emerald flames casting wild shadows across the battle-scarred walls. The ministry was waking up, and its officials were arriving for the day. The dawn would reveal a changed world, and Harry knew now it was not in his hands to decide the fate of the two Dark Lords. He had fought his battle. The rest, judgment, politics, the future, belonged to the ministry, the Wizengamot, and fate itself. Chapter 358, The Last Phoenix Song. The Floo network, glowing emerald green in every atrium fireplace, announced the arrival of ministry officials. Low-level employees stumbled out first, their faces pale under the eerie light. They stepped into what they thought would be a normal morning only to find themselves on a battlefield. The ministry atrium, once a shining symbol of order, lay in ruins. Broken marble covered the floor, torn tapestries flapped from broken walls, and the air still sizzled with leftover magic. Dozens of masked figures lay stunned like discarded dolls, and two notorious Dark Lords slumped in defeat at the center of it all. Then, higher-ranking officials appeared. Leading them was Cornelius Fudge, Minister of Magic, his expression swinging from anger to shock as he marched into the atrium with his chest puffed out. He froze as soon as he took in the devastation, the shattered floor, the unconscious dark wizards, and finally, the kneeling form of Albus Dumbledore, twisted in agony. His gaze then locked on the glowing figure of Harry Potter, who stood in the midst of the wreckage. "What in Merlin's name, what is going on here?" Fudge sputtered, his voice cracking with a mix of alarm and indignation. He turned to Amelia Bones, standing nearby with a grim, calm look. "Amelia! Explain yourself. What is this carnage?" Amelia stepped forward, speaking in a composed, official manner that cut through the chaos. "Minister, we received an urgent alert about powerful dark magic inside the ministry. We responded and, as you can see, the threat has been contained." She gestured to the fallen dark wizards, then specifically at Grindelwald and Voldemort. Fudge followed her gaze, and his eyes widened to a ridiculous degree. He stumbled forward, legs shaking, once he recognized the two infamous figures, Grindelwald, still radiating a faint aura of malevolence, and Voldemort, his snake-like face slack and unconscious. A ripple of hushed, panicked whispers ran through the crowd of ministry officials. Grindelwald? Voldemort? Both alive? Could the rumors flying around all year be true? Fudge's face paled further, if that were possible. He sensed, with sickening certainty, that his carefully crafted political career was collapsing. How could he possibly spin this? His campaign against Charles Potter and Dumbledore, his ministry's denial of dark activity, now all of it lay shattered, just like the pieces of marble strewn about the floor. Following Amelia's directions, the Aurors quickly started securing the captured dark wizards and evaluating the damage. Meanwhile, Harry turned away. His task was finished. The ministry, with its swarm of personnel, had taken over, and he had no desire to remain in the spotlight. He gave one last glance at Voldemort and Grindelwald, lying at his feet. They belonged to the ministry's jurisdiction now. He felt no triumph, no anger, just a quiet sense of finality. The prophecy and all its absurdities had led to this point. Maybe vanquish meant more than one outcome. Walking across the rubble, Harry approached Sirius, who stood off to the side, sporting a relieved grin. Harry ignored the baffled stares and hushed whispers from the ministry workers, who were only beginning to grasp that he alone had defeated two of history's most terrifying Dark Lords. Let them stare. Let Fudge worry. It was no longer Harry's concern. But just as he reached Sirius, a soft sob broke through the low buzz of voices. "Charles?" Harry turned to see his younger brother kneeling beside Dumbledore, the old headmaster's head resting in his lap. Despite everything, despite the manipulations and the misplaced fame, Charles clearly held genuine affection for Dumbledore. Dumbledore had, after all, been consistently kind and supportive to him, the chosen one, the boy who lived. Now, seeing him on the brink of death, writhing in silent agony, Charles was heartbroken. Fawkes the Phoenix perched near Dumbledore, his brilliant feathers dim with sorrow. Silvery tears dripped from Fawkes's eyes onto Dumbledore's mangled hand, but even a phoenix's miraculous tears had no effect on the merciless curse ravaging him. Black veins marred the headmaster's entire form, the final marks of a creeping demise. "Help him! Please, someone help Professor Dumbledore!" Charles cried out, voice thick with tears as he begged the crowd around them. A Mediwitch with a resolute air pushed through the bystanders and knelt at Dumbledore's side. She performed a swift diagnostic spell with her wand, her movements quick and certain. After a moment, she stood, shaking her head, her expression solemn. Harry approached, despite a faint reluctance. He looked down at Dumbledore pale, sweaty, struggling for each breath. The curse had spread everywhere. Even with Harry's knowledge of healing spells and dark magic, he knew there was no cure now. It was far too late. Tear-tracked, Charles raised his head, his gaze pleading. "Harry, you can do something, can't you? You saved everyone else today, you can save him too, can't you?" After watching Harry's overwhelming power in battle, Charles clung to the fragile hope that his older brother could accomplish any miracle. Harry met Charles's tearful stare, then turned his attention to Dumbledore once more. He shook his head in a quiet yet firm refusal. The curse was advanced, the headmaster too old and weakened. Even his abilities had limits. Another hush settled over the atrium, the onlookers holding their breath as Dumbledore's breathing became shallower and his movements more feeble. Finally, with one last unsteady exhale, Dumbledore went still. His once bright eyes flicked open briefly, directing a final gaze at Harry. His lips moved in a faint whisper, "Sorry." It was too late for that, and Harry felt nothing, no anger, no relief, no sadness. Just a sense of emptiness. Fawkes, perched on Dumbledore's shoulder, released a mournful, aching cry that echoed through the ruined hall, silencing every voice. Then, in a brilliant flash of crimson and gold, the phoenix vanished. A single note of sorrow lingered in the air, underscoring the headmaster's passing. Harry turned away. He had no wish to remain here, to become the center of more attention, or to deal with the avalanche of shock and rumors. Exhaustion pressed down on him, physical and emotional. He just wanted to leave and get some rest. Enough had happened tonight. But fate had other ideas. Abruptly, a harsh, throaty growl echoed in the silence, followed by a strange swirling noise. Everyone in the atrium, aurors, officials, order members, turned as one, their wands instinctively rising again. From the spot where Grindelwald had collapsed near the broken fountain, a coil of dark, acrid smoke rose like a living shadow. It twisted in midair, swirling viciously as if taking shape. A figure began to emerge from the darkness. Grindelwald, awake. And something about him was different. Chapter 359, When Darkness Refuses to Die. A jarring hush fell over the atrium, leaving everyone too shocked or exhausted to speak. Dumbledore lay motionless in death, his skin etched with the black curse. The ministry was in disarray, Aurors scrambling to subdue the few remaining Death Eaters who were still conscious. Harry, drained by the night's battles, had stepped away, hoping the conflict was truly finished. Yet fate disagreed. From the rubble of the ruined fountain, Gellert Grindelwald moved again, even though he had been thoroughly stunned just moments earlier. A swirl of dark, acrid smoke rose around him, coiling like a living shadow. Harry's eyes narrowed. "Just when I thought I could finally get some real sleep," he muttered, instantly shifting to the forefront of the crowd. Sirius, James, and Moody flanked him, wands held ready. One Auror gasped. "How can he even stand? Our spells should have kept him unconscious for hours." "It's some kind of foul magic," Moody growled, his magical eye whirling in its socket, trying to track the strands of black smoke twisting around Grindelwald's form. Grindelwald's eyes opened, revealing pale irises shining with eerie clarity. Dark tendrils wrapped themselves around his torso, writhing over his torn robes as if feeding on an inner reservoir of malevolence. A low, raspy laugh spilled from his lips, soft at first, then growing louder, brimming with unsettling amusement. "This is impossible," Lily whispered, fear threaded through her voice. Still shaken by Dumbledore's death, Charles stared in disbelief. Amelia moved in, her wand raised, as the Aurors expanded into a wide formation. Harry wasted no time. He remembered earlier that night when Fenrir and Vladimir had used warped magic to power themselves up. This was another foul technique, and he wasn't about to let it advance further. He blasted a rapid-fire series of spells, each intended to disable or restrain. Crimson stunners, silver ropes of binding charms, and waves of concussive force hammered the black cloud swirling around Grindelwald. Yet nothing happened. The black tendrils merely swallowed the spells, as though Harry's magic were no more than a breath of air against a raging blaze. Every single curse vanished into the dark haze without resistance, and Grindelwald's laughter deepened, full of a cold, mocking edge far more disturbing than open rage. No effect, Sirius murmured, astonished. Don't bother, young Potter, Grindelwald's distorted voice reverberated from inside the darkness, sounding both frail and menacing. It is, futile. He spoke weakly, each word harsh with exhaustion, yet there was an underlying layer of danger in his tone. The black tendrils throbbed, then gradually began to disperse, revealing Grindelwald standing upright again. But he had changed. His face was gaunt, his complexion ashen, and his eyes were sunken yet still glowed with unnatural intensity. His once elegant robes now seemed too large on his withered form. Dark magic clung to him like a swirling mantle, pulsing with sinister power. My old friend Albus has departed on his next great journey, Grindelwald said hoarsely, his gaze drifting to Dumbledore's lifeless body before settling on Harry. And it seems, it is time for me to join him. I wouldn't want to miss the train, now would I? A fresh wave of unease coursed through Harry. Grindelwald spoke of death, of following Dumbledore into some grim afterlife. Yet there was another note in his voice, something deliberate, carefully planned. Several Aurors shared uncertain looks, the confusion plain on their faces. Sirius snorted, eyeing Grindelwald with mingled doubt and suspicion. He's dying. Grindelwald let out a rough chuckle. Certainly I'm dying, Black. Did you think I would live forever? He paused, his gaze sliding to Voldemort's unconscious form lying nearby. A calculating gleam flickered in his eyes. But before I go, there's a final piece of business. I can't leave, without making one last contribution. It wouldn't do, would it, for the Age of Darkness to simply end here. So, I've decided to do something generous. The dark magic around Grindelwald surged, growing thicker and more viscous, before stretching outward in tendrils across the rubble-strewn floor. Their path soon became horribly obvious, the creeping black tendrils advanced toward Voldemort's unmoving body. Stop it! Moody thundered, sending a hex at Grindelwald. Others followed, flinging curses at either Grindelwald or Voldemort. But the dark aura consumed each spell effortlessly. Harry added a hail of spells as well, fighting to break the link, but again, the black magic devoured every curse he unleashed, growing denser, stronger, pulsing with Grindelwald's waning life force. Disarming charms, binding hexes, even blasts meant to destroy none could halt the encroaching darkness. With a sickening twist in his stomach, Harry realized the truth. Grindelwald was transferring his power, his last remnants of strength and essence, to Voldemort. A final, vile act of legacy meant to ensure darkness would not perish with him. Harry's pulse pounded as he watched Grindelwald's body tremble, that dark aura seeping from him. Meanwhile, Voldemort's eyelids began to stir, as though he were emerging from a deep sleep. Pinned by Aurors across the atrium, Magnus struggled furiously. Master, he began, but Amelia cut him off with a stunner. The rest of the onlookers watched in grim horror as Grindelwald's life force continued pouring into the one wizard who absolutely did not need more power. Then, Voldemort twitched. His fingers flexed, his eyelids opening to reveal crimson eyes that had lost their previous dullness. They shone now with a blazing, renewed intensity. He turned to Grindelwald's fading form, momentary comprehension crossing his snake-like face. His thin lips curled into a slow, dreadful grin. A guttural laugh built in his throat and erupted into a triumphant, unhinged cackle. Yes. Let the darkness remain, Grindelwald whispered, his voice fading as he watched Voldemort awaken. His cheeks sank in, skin turning a pale grey. Finally, at the height of the twisted spell, Grindelwald's entire body disintegrated. He became ashen flakes, drifting onto the broken marble. His last murmur of laughter lingered, chilling all who heard it. Grindelwald was gone, leaving only a faint scattering of grey ash. But his strength had taken root in another host. Voldemort flung his head back and roared with glee, the echo of his triumph booming through the ravaged atrium. A massive wave of magic exploded outward from him, an invisible shockwave hurling everyone to the floor. Aurors, Order members, Ministry officials Lily, James, Charles, Emma, Fleur all were swept off their feet, smashing into walls or collapsing where they stood. Their wands were tossed aside, their breaths torn from their lungs, leaving them dizzy and disoriented. Only one figure stayed upright, unmoved by the blast, Harry Potter, still shrouded in that faint white glow. He stood firm, watching as Voldemort, newly reborn and more powerful than ever, slowly rose, his crimson eyes blazing with a heightened malice. The battle, it seemed, was far from finished. If anything, it had only grown more terrifying. Chapter 360, The Hunt Begins. Voldemort rose like a resurrected Serpent King, his crimson eyes burning with a terrifying intensity that sent a fresh wave of fear through the already traumatized onlookers. He tested his newfound strength by flexing his fingers, a cruel smile stretching his thin lips. Inside him pulsed Grindelwald's power, a dark, intoxicating energy that throbbed beneath his skin, twisting and amplifying his own magic until it felt different, stronger. He fixed his gaze on Harry, who stood resolute amidst the debris, an island of white radiance in a sea of darkness. Voldemort felt his arrogance climb, fueled by Grindelwald's transferred strength. He intended to show this upstart boy, this so-called chosen child, the true face of power. You may have defeated me once, Potter, but that is not going to happen again, Voldemort hissed. His voice, amplified by magic, echoed through the stunned atrium. Now you stand before Lord Voldemort reborn, ascended. You are nothing. With that, he launched a brutal assault, a barrage of dark curses infused with Grindelwald's chillingly precise magic. Cutting curses, bone breakers, soul-searing hexes, a maelstrom of lethal intent was unleashed upon Harry. Yet Harry moved with an almost supernatural speed. His white aura flared, deflecting and absorbing the onslaught. Spells that would have crippled or killed any other wizard simply evaporated against his radiant shield, leaving not a scratch or tremor. He countered with his own spells, faster and more powerful than before. Bolts of pure magic slammed into Voldemort's hastily erected shields, shattering them with contemptuous ease. After witnessing the extent of Voldemort's increased strength, Harry felt a grim relief. Things had not spiraled completely out of control. He was still a bit stronger than this new Voldemort and could very well end the war today. Having trouble, Tom? Harry's voice carried a faint edge of mockery. All that power, still not enough. For a moment, Voldemort recoiled in surprise before frustration dawned on his face. He was indeed stronger. Grindelwald's power was potent, but it wasn't enough. Not yet, not against Harry. He needed time to integrate this new power, time to master it, so he could truly become the ascended Dark Lord he envisioned. A direct confrontation now, even with this borrowed strength, was too risky. He needed to retreat and regroup before he could return, unstoppable. However, flight was anathema to Voldemort's pride. He needed a diversion, a way to escape without appearing to flee in terror. His eyes darted around the ruined atrium, taking in the scattered debris, shattered pillars, and heaps of rubble. Then, a dark and cunning idea sparked in his mind. With a flick of his wand, Voldemort unleashed a complex, wordless spell. The very air around them vibrated, and with a deep groaning rumble, tons of rubble scattered across the atrium began to rise. Shattered marble, broken statues, and fragments of the fountain were lifted into the air, suspended above the stunned and scattered crowd, a precarious, deadly canopy of debris. Harry's eyes widened. He recognized the tactic instantly, a classic villain move, using innocents as shields and distractions. He scanned the crowd, searching for help. His gaze fell on the fallen Aurors, injured Order members, and terrified Ministry officials. He looked for signs of resistance, for raised wands or protective charms, for any sign that these supposedly trained wizards would defend themselves when it truly mattered. There was nothing. Only fear. Faces were pale and frozen, eyes wide with terror as they stared at the looming mass of rubble. Not a single wand was raised, not a single shield charm cast. The wizarding world, which prided itself on its magical prowess and ability to defend against the dark arts, was paralyzed by fear, utterly incapable of acting when the moment arrived. This, Harry thought bitterly, is why dark wizards thrive. So many with magic, yet so few willing to use it when it matters. The few who might have helped the Order members, Sirius, James, Amelia, Moody, and the Aurors were unconscious, worn down by the night's brutal battles before Voldemort's power wave had knocked them out. Harry noticed that Fleur and Emma were awake, their wands raised and faces determined, but even together, they wouldn't be enough to stop this, not quickly enough. Voldemort laughed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the atrium's frozen silence. A parting gift, Potter, he sneered, voice laced with cold pleasure. Choose save them, or stop me. Enjoy your victory, while you can. And with that, he sprang toward the nearest flue fireplace, snatched some flue powder, and vanished in a swirl of green flames, deserting his allies without hesitation. The moment his form dissolved into the flue flames, the spell holding the rebel aloft faltered. With a deafening roar, tons of debris began to plummet, a deadly rain of shattered stone and marble poised to crush the helpless crowd below. Harry had no choice. He couldn't pursue Voldemort, not yet, while the lives of these people were in immediate peril. Even though he did not care for the lives of many of them, the unconscious bodies of Sirius and Amelia were also at risk, and he could not simply stand by. With a surge of power, he channeled his magic, focusing his intent and will. He couldn't simply block the falling debris, its sheer mass and widespread impact were too great. Transfiguration was the only solution. Concentrating every fiber of his being, Harry unleashed a wave of transfigurative magic, a silent, invisible force that swept upward and encompassed the falling rebel. Stone twisted, marble softened, and jagged edges were smoothed away as heavy fragments transformed, morphing into millions upon millions of delicate flower petals. They cascaded down in a gentle, harmless shower of vibrant colors, burying the stunned crowd in an unexpected blizzard of blossoms. The immediate danger was averted. Moments before, the atrium had been poised to become a scene of carnage and terror. Now, it was filled with the soft rustle of falling petals and the sweet scent of countless blooms, masking the lingering stench of battle. Yet Voldemort was gone. Damn it! Harry's shout rang across the chamber, frustration evident. With Voldemort's magic magnified by Grindelwald's essence, the Dark Lord could become a threat beyond imagination. Harry refused to let him gain full mastery of those powers. Everyone he cared for was at risk. He turned to Emma and Fleur, who were already tending to Sirius and Amelia, their faces edged with concern. "Take care of them," Harry said in a low, urgent voice. "I have to go after him." "Don't worry, I'll bring him back." Without waiting for a reply, he turned back to the still flickering flue fireplace, took a deep breath, and stepped into the emerald flames. He disappeared into the swirling green, leaving behind the scent of flower petals as he plunged into the unknown, into the hunt. Voldemort would not be allowed time to regroup. Voldemort would not terrorize anyone again. Harry intended to end this war tonight. Every one of Voldemort's followers lay either dead or captured, with only Voldemort himself still free. It was the perfect moment to finish him. The hunt was on, and this time, one of them wouldn't be returning. Chapter 361, An Unlikely Alliance. Harry arrived at Black Castle in a whirlwind of urgency, slipping through the grand doors and hurrying straight to Arcturus Black's private study. Arcturus had been pacing by a window, his quiet agitation evident in every measured step. At the sight of Harry, he turned sharply, his eyes narrowing with concern. Harry wasted no time. He launched into a rapid account of the recent events, the defeat of the Dark Lords, Dumbledore's tragic death, Grindelwald's desperate final stand, Voldemort's sudden surge in power, and the near-catastrophic destruction at the Ministry. As Harry detailed the chaos, Arcturus listened in silence. Although his expression remained impassive, Harry could detect the tightening of his jaw and the glint of steely resolve in his grey eyes as the gravity of the situation sank in. "Voldemort has escaped," Harry concluded, his voice laced with frustration. "He's stronger now, somehow imbued with Grindelwald's power. I need to find him, grandfather, before he has time to consolidate his strength." Arcturus steepled his fingers, his gaze thoughtful. "Locating Voldemort has always been problematic. If he is intelligent, he will not return to any of the hideouts we know. I can have people look, but I doubt they will find anything. Other than that, I'm afraid I can't help you locate him, Harry. If you plan to chase him down, I unfortunately have no leads to offer." Harry sank into a chair, his mind racing at full throttle. "I can't just let him roam free," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "He's more dangerous than ever, and if he gets a chance to rest or plan, who knows what he'll do next. I have to finish him today." For a moment, the only sounds were the crackling of a nearby torch and the faint hum of magic running through Black Castle's wards. Then, as if struck by sudden inspiration, Harry shot upright, his eyes shining with a new idea. "Snape," he muttered. "He's the only one who hasn't been seen at the Ministry tonight. As a double spy, he might know Voldemort's habits and hideouts." Arcturus straightened, his tone measured as he considered the suggestion. "Severus Snape?" That man's loyalties have always been a mystery. Harry nodded, his determination unwavering. But he might have an inkling of where Voldemort likes to hide. And right now, that's our best chance. After a moment of tense silence, Arcturus pressed his lips together and gave a reluctant nod. Go. Time is of the essence. Without further hesitation, Harry pulled out the Marauder's map. He hoped that Snape was still where he expected him to be and that he hadn't fled upon hearing the news of Dumbledore's death. With a quick flick of his wand and a murmured incantation, the intricate lines of Hogwarts Castle bloomed into existence on the parchment. Harry's eyes scanned the map, passing over the familiar labels of classrooms and corridors until he found it, Severus Snape Potions Classroom. Perfect. He's at Hogwarts, Harry confirmed, relief mingling with renewed determination. I need to go. Arcturus nodded gravely. Be cautious, Harry. Snape is unpredictable. I will be careful, grandfather, Harry assured him with a curt nod. I'll be back as soon as I can. Dash. Harry apparat just outside Hogwarts grounds and swiftly made his way through the ancient castle halls, the Marauder's map tucked securely under his arm. The castle was eerily silent and devoid of students. Harry moved swiftly through the deserted corridors, his footsteps echoing in the stillness as he headed directly for the dungeons and the potions lab. He reached the heavy oak door, hesitating only a moment before pushing it open and stepping inside. The potions lab was dimly lit, cauldrons bubbled and steamed on braziers, while shelves lined with jars of strange ingredients cast long, eerie shadows across the room. And there, amid the fumes and shifting shadows, stood Severus Snape. His back was turned as he meticulously stirred a cauldron, his black robes blending seamlessly with the gloom. Snape turned as Harry entered, his sallow face tightening into a familiar scowl. Potter, he drawled, his voice dripping with disdain. What is the meaning of this? Dumbledore's dead, Harry cut him off bluntly. Grindelwald too, the old Dark Lord transferred his power to Voldemort before dying. And I need your help finding your master before he becomes too powerful to stop. The news hit Snape like a series of blows. His face, already pale, turned almost ghostly. Dumbledore, dead. The curse finally took him with some help from Grindelwald. Harry's eyes fixed on Snape, unyielding. You know where Voldemort might have gone. Help me find him. Snape's lip curled in disdain. And why should I help you? With Dumbledore gone, my safest option is to return to the Dark Lord's side. Is it? Harry's voice carried a dangerous edge. He fled from me tonight, even with Grindelwald's power. He'll lose the next battle too, but I want to make it quick. Do you really want to bet your future on the losing side, Professor? Snape's sneer deepened. And what, precisely, is my alternative, Potter? Without Dumbledore's protection, my fate is sealed. Azkaban awaits, regardless of which side wins or loses. I can speak for you, Harry offered. No guarantees, but it's better odds than you'll have with Voldemort. He left his followers behind without a second thought tonight. Is that truly who you want to trust your future to? After a long, resigned sigh that visibly drained the tension from his shoulders, Snape finally relented. Very well, Potter, he said grudgingly, his voice laced with weary resignation. Let us not waste any more time then. There are several locations he favors. We should check them all. For the next hour, the two of them apparat from one dark hideout to another, a deserted manor in Yorkshire, a labyrinthine cave complex in Wales, and a forgotten castle in Scotland. Each location proved empty. Voldemort was nowhere to be found, having vanished without a trace. Frustration gnawed at Harry as he realized he was running out of both time and leads. Just as he was about to decide to postpone the hunt until another day, his eyes fell on Snape's left arm. The dark mark, stark against his pale skin, suddenly sparked an idea. Snape, Harry said, his voice sharp and decisive, the dark mark. Voldemort uses it to call his Death Eaters, there must be a connection, a magical link that we can trace back to him. Snape's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. He looked down at the dark mark on his arm, a grimace twisting his lips. It might be possible. But it is a very advanced dark spell. You want to tamper with it. You've come this far, and it's our only real shot right now, Harry pointed out firmly. Will you let me try? Snape looked uneasy, his voice turning acerbic. Well, the curse seared into my skin isn't exactly warm and fuzzy to begin with. If this is what must be done, so be it. Just don't botch the spell. Despite the underlying tension, Harry offered a determined smile. I'll do my best. No promises on the pain part, though. Harry examined the dark mark carefully, his heightened senses discerning the intricate layers of dark magic woven into his skin. Raising his wand, he began to cast a spell. I'll try to hook into the magic link and track him, he declared, his voice resolute. Brace yourself. Placing the tip of his wand lightly over the mark, Harry began chanting a spell that pulsed with a faint white energy. The dark mark shuddered, and a tremor coursed through Snape's entire body. A rasping groan escaped Snape's lips as the magic took hold. Harry pressed on, undeterred. If this worked, he would finally have Voldemort's location, and if it failed, he might lose the last chance to end the Dark Lord before he grew even stronger. Chapter 362, When Titans Collide. Thunder rumbled across an iron-grey sky, a booming drumbeat to the coming storm, as Lord Voldemort stood in a room of a manor perched at the edge of a rocky cliff. His black robes now finer, with a regal cut that matched his imagined ascendance, whipped and billowed in the bitter wind, echoing the turbulent sea churning far below. Dark waves, the color of bruised plums, crashed against the jagged shoreline of Grindelwald's secret isle, a place whispered about in legends yet familiar to no living being save Voldemort and its former master. Grindelwald had revealed this island only the day before, a place of power where darkness thrived. Indeed, it was precisely that. The island throbbed with an unmistakable malevolence, a living force that drew nourishment from shadows and despair. Ancient runes, both detailed and malicious, sprawled across the bedrock, engraved by hands long since turned to dust, conducting power through the land like veins of tainted lifeblood. Standing on the island's summit, the decaying manor towered at its loftiest peak. Its shattered, vacant windows glared out like hollow eyes across the raging sea, mirroring the brewing storm in the sky and the one stirring within Voldemort's own soul. To think, Voldemort said, his voice echoing with an eerie resonance and a spine-chilling edge, that old man kept this refuge concealed for so long. His pale, skeletal fingers sketched arcane shapes in the air, sensing the island's dark energy slither around him like a serpent. The ideal location, the sole place to fully command these new abilities. Suddenly, a burst of blazing fury contorted his snake-like features, twisting them into a grotesque mask of rage. The disgrace at the ministry replayed in his thoughts, its bitter sting still fresh, festering like an unhealed wound. Potter, not the falsely celebrated Charles, but his elder brother, the true threat who moved in shadows, had proven a much more formidable foe than anyone, including Dumbledore, had imagined. Even fortified by Grindelwald's power, Voldemort had been forced to retreat, an outcome utterly alien and abhorrent to his inflated ego. But here, he hissed, his tone sinking into a poisonous murmur that still reached across the wind-lashed plateau, here, the earth itself magnifies dark magic. Here, I can. He halted, breathing in deeply, letting the island's suffocating energy flood his veins like a sinister tonic. Here, at last, I can hone these newfound abilities and become the master I was destined to be. Irrepressible. Unassailable. Supreme. Potter, Voldemort swore, his voice rising to reverberate off the frigid stone walls, he will pay. He will atone for the humiliation. He will pay for the losses of my loyal followers. He will pay for everything. Lost in his intoxicating reverie of power and vengeance, he almost missed the subtle tremor in the air, the faintest whisper of displaced magic that was not his own, not the island's inherent darkness, but something distinct, something alien, rapidly approaching. Decades of combat instinct, honed to a razor's edge by countless battles and betrayals, screamed a silent warning. His body moved before his conscious mind could fully register the threat, a lightning-fast reaction born of pure, primal survival. A massive cutting curse, invisible in its speed and precision, sliced through the air where his head had been moments before. Only pure, reflexive instinct saved him, as his body twisted and contorted, dodging the lethal spell by a hair's breadth. 3 more spells followed in quick succession, each more potent and vicious than the last, a relentless barrage designed to overwhelm and obliterate. Protego Maxima. Voldemort thundered, his voice fracturing under the weight of both shock and fury, acting on pure impulse. He flung up a shield charm of colossal power just as the magic bombardment crashed into his guard. The shield, black and unyielding, sparked and wavered under the tremendous pressure of the attack, pushed to the brink but refusing to fail. Shards of rock exploded from the wall behind him, ground into dust by the near misses, the raw energy of the strike tainting the air with the acrid tang of charred stone and ozone. "Reveal yourself, coward!" Voldemort roared, his voice resonating through the manor, brimming with scorn and a quiver of anxiety he refused to concede. Face me. Then, from the darkness of a collapsing archway, a shape appeared, moving into the faint glow filtering through the manor's shattered windows. As the figure advanced fully into view, Voldemort's fury, already at a fever pitch, climbed to an even more horrifying summit. Harry Potter! He stood before him, framed against the stormy sky, a stark contrast to the island's oppressive darkness. Clad in pristine battle robes of midnight blue that moved like a second skin, Harry appeared impossibly fresh and composed, as if he had not spent the last 24 hours in continuous, brutal combat. His emerald eyes, hard and unwavering, locked onto Voldemort, radiating a chilling resolve that sent a shiver of unease down the Dark Lord's spine, despite his newfound power and carefully cultivated arrogance. "You," Voldemort snarled, the word erupting from his throat like a venomous curse. His voice was a low, dangerous growl vibrating with barely contained fury. How did you find this place?" His tone was less a question and more an accusation, a desperate attempt to understand the impossible breach of his carefully guarded sanctuary. Harry remained silent for a moment, his gaze steady and coldly analytical, intensifying the simmering rage in Voldemort. Harry had arrived on the island cloaked in shadows and silence, guided by the lingering magical residue he traced from Snape's dark mark, a trail of dark energy that had led him unerringly to Grindelwald's hidden domain. He had hoped for a clean, silent assassination, a swift end before Voldemort could fully unleash his augmented power. Yet Voldemort, despite his arrogance and rage, remained too wary, too experienced in the art of survival to be caught unaware. "Your dark mark makes a surprisingly effective tracking device," Harry replied, his voice calm and almost conversational, yet edged with steel that promised violence. "If you truly understand the magic behind it." A hint of a smile played on his lips, a subtle, taunting curve that only further inflamed Voldemort's already incandescent rage. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. "What? There was such a flaw in the dark mark the first designed?" "No. Even if that were possible, you would need access to the mark to find me. I am sure none of the Ministry wizards would have allowed you to harm my captured pureblood followers. How were you able to find me?" "Guess," Harry replied coolly. Voldemort's face contorted, his serpentine features twisting into a grotesque mask of fury. "Severus," he spat the name like a curse, a venomous expression of pure hatred. "The traitorous cur. He will pay dearly for this ultimate betrayal." "He made his choice, Tom," Harry said flatly, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold declaration of fate. He drew both Gryffindor's sword, its silver blade gleaming with an inner light against the gathering gloom, and the wand Voldemort failed to recognize, the dark wood of the Elder Wand, held silently in his left hand, promising unimaginable power. "Just as you're about to face the consequences of yours." The air between them grew heavy, laden with magical pressure, a nearly tangible force field of raw energy crackling with anticipation. Both wizards gathered their strength and focused their intent, preparing for a final, earth-shattering clash. Yet something felt different to Harry. The very atmosphere of the island seemed to warp and twist, enhancing Voldemort's dark aura. The ancient bedrock hummed with malevolent energy, lending strength to his already formidable, now amplified abilities. "You should have waited, Potter," Voldemort laughed, a maniacal sound that echoed across the windswept plateau with a chilling edge. "Give me time to hunt you down properly, to savor your fear, to break you slowly, piece by piece. Instead, you, in your arrogance, have walked right into my perfect sanctuary. This isle was built by dark wizards far greater than me or Grindelwald, designed and enchanted to amplify magic of the blackest kind." Harry's grip tightened on his weapons, his knuckles widening around their hilts. He could now feel the oppressive weight of the island's dark enchantments pressing down on him, feeding Voldemort's power and elevating it to a level that nearly matched his own. This would not be the swift, clean assassination he had envisioned. This would be a brutal, protracted war of magic, fought on ground specifically designed to favor darkness. This would be the hard way. "Then I suppose," Harry said steadily, his voice calm and resolute in stark contrast to Voldemort's manic laughter, as his own magic began to visibly manifest. Crackling purple lightning danced around him in vibrant defiance against the encroaching gloom, "we'll just have to do this the hard way." The era's two most formidable wizards, the champion of good and the Lord of Darkness, stood facing each other in the desolate manor. Their power built to impossible levels as the very air vibrated, shimmered, and distorted with the sheer force of their magic. The island itself trembled in anticipation of the cataclysmic clash about to unfold. Thunder boomed once more, nearer this time, directly above, splitting the iron-grey clouds like a cosmic lash, as if all of nature, indeed, the heavens themselves, were pausing, steeling for the ultimate, catastrophic finale. The final battle, the culmination of years of struggle, prophecy, and fate of good versus evil was about to begin. Chapter 363, Clash of Titans. The first clash between Harry and Voldemort was more than a duel, it was an eruption of magic powerful enough to feel like the world itself might fracture. Harry's sword gleamed like a comet, slicing the air with streaks of silver light, while his wand flung spells so potent they could have leveled a fortress. Voldemort, however, didn't falter. His wand poured out a wave of absolute darkness, a living shadow that consumed Harry's magic whole. Black tendrils lashed out like serpents, smashing stone and snapping at Harry's heels. The ancient manor they fought in groaned as though it were alive and dying at the same time. Windows shattered, sending shards of glass glimmering through the air. Stone walls fractured, and wooden beams snapped like twigs under the forces unleashed by their spells. "Is this your best, Potter?" Voldemort's voice thundered, full of mockery. "It might frighten others, but here, I am all-powerful." He flicked his wand again, releasing a surge of fiend fire that rushed at Harry in a blazing tide of destruction. Yet these flames were no ordinary conjuration, twisted by Voldemort's might and magnified a dozen times by the island's wicked energy, they twisted and merged into monstrous, nightmarish forms. Fierce chimeras of molten fire bared their fangs, and blazing basilisks fixed eyes like burning coals on their target, each flaming creature lunging and snapping, ravenous for carnage, eager to burn everything to ash. Harry didn't back off. Grasping Gryffindor's sword, he poured magic into the blade until it crackled with purple lightning. Then he faced the oncoming tide of fiend fire directly, swirling the sword with such force that it tore through the firestorm. Where their powers collided, the very air looked as if it might rip apart, the earth shaking so intensely that cracks spider-webbed beneath their feet. In mere minutes, the manor was reduced to rumbling debris, leaving only its foundation. "You talk a lot for a loser, Tom," Harry said, his tone cutting through the roaring spells and howling wind. He sounded calm, almost bored, a stark contrast to Voldemort's frenzied proclamations. "Quite a lot of confidence from a coward who ran away from battle just half a day ago. You've already forgotten the taste of defeat." Voldemort's features twisted in rage, but he couldn't form a proper comeback. The shame of fleeing from someone less than half his age burned beneath his bravado. Frustration fueled his attack, but Harry refused to give him the satisfaction. Now it was Harry's turn to unleash a flurry of spells so rapid they left shining trails in the air, each aimed at a different angle. Simultaneously, he lunged with his sword, striking directly toward Voldemort's heart. Voldemort twisted aside just in time, though the defense he raised shattered against Harry's magic. A sliver of dark energy cut across Voldemort's robes, leaving a smoking gash on his shoulder. "First blood is yours, Potter," Voldemort hissed, his tone tight with pain but his lips shaped into a harsh smile. "Now let me show you real power." He lifted his hands, and it seemed like the island itself answered his summons. The ground split apart, belching black smoke and lava. Even the last remains of the manor's foundation crumbled into dust. Harry leapt backward, scrambling to higher ground on a jagged outcrop rising from the quaking earth. As he watched the wound he'd inflicted on Voldemort heal itself almost instantly, Harry realized the fight wouldn't be simple. The island's influence was more than a mere power boost, it was granting continuous regeneration. "Impressive light show, Tom," Harry taunted, his voice still strangely calm. "But can you actually control it? Or is this just Grindelwald's and the island's magic steering you around? Nothing you've done has hurt me yet. Maybe you can't handle outside power." Instead of answering, Voldemort responded with a spell unlike any Harry had seen, a mass of pure, undiluted darkness. Voldemort's wand traced a slow, deliberate arc, and from its tip erupted a torrent of shadows, surging forward, annihilating light and air in its path. Harry lifted both sword and wand in a swift cross pattern, channeling his magic into a protective shield of incandescent energy, a wall of radiance facing down the encroaching darkness. Their collision was not an explosion but a silent, trembling crash. Light struggling against shadow, a fundamental clash of opposing forces. Harry slid backward several yards, his boots carving deep furrows in the unsteady, rocky ground. The sheer force threatened to shatter his defense. The darkness seeped along the edges of his barrier, creeping like poison. He could taste emptiness, a sharp metallic flavor on his tongue, a sign of approaching oblivion. Without pausing, Harry fought back, sending forth his own fierce retaliation against Voldemort's sweeping power. Gryffindor's sword pulsed with living currents of his energy, every slice, slash, and thrust edged with crackling purple lightning. Electric arcs formed intricate runic symbols in the air, glyphs of power, signs of defiance, ancient magic unleashed. Meanwhile, the Elder Wand seemed to move independently, weaving complex spells that boosted Harry's offense and sharpened his defenses. It became a dance of devastation, a storm of brilliance and force pushing Voldemort into slow retreat. "You're strong, Potter," Voldemort acknowledged in a strained voice, grudging respect filtering through his natural arrogance. He parried, dodged, and blocked, his own barriers shimmering under the sustained assault. "But you're still just a child, dabbling in powers you scarcely understand. You can't possibly master forces on this scale." His words rang with a need to reassert dominance, to reclaim the battle. Next, the Dark Lord conjured a spell showing his deep corruption of nature. He poisoned the air itself. A toxic cloud the color of bruised plums billowed around him, promising a prolonged, agonizing death to anything it engulfed. Harry reacted instantly, summoning a wandless barrier of pure air around himself, an oasis amidst the spreading toxins. Yet for that single second, he had to divert focus. Voldemort seized the chance. A blast of unrefined, concussive power struck Harry in the ribs, smashing into him like a wrecking ball. Harry's form hurtled through sharp rock formations, fragments scattering, before he managed to steady himself. Blood hot and metallic trickled from his lip. Struggling upright, he took a moment to breathe, every inhalation an ache that burned his lungs. Yet he stood unbroken, unyielding. He spat blood onto the scorched ground, his green eyes gleaming with iron determination. "That all you got, Tom?" he asked, his voice mocking, seeking to anger the Dark Lord further. "I've had worse knocks in training." Their magic clashed again and again, every exchange deadlier than the last. The ground beneath them became a desolate field of burning craters and magical scorch marks. Rolling hills and sparse vegetation were gone, replaced by a flat, ravaged war zone, evidence of the staggering force they unleashed. Deep cracks spiderwebbed across the terrain, some leading down to molten rock that churned ominously far below the surface, revealing the island's molten core. They fought on two titans in an endless struggle, neither conceding, neither stepping back. Voldemort, cloaked in slithering threads of dark energy that moved like living shadows, a nightmare in flesh. Harry, ringed by arcs of purple lightning, intensifying with each blow, a brilliant defender amid the encroaching night. Their spells illuminated the night sky in a contest of destructive fireworks, each strike a miniature apocalypse, every collision a thunderclap, each duel enough to shift continents if left unchecked. They inflicted wounds that would have killed any ordinary wizard. Yet they healed almost instantly, driven by adrenaline, magic, and raw willpower. The island itself moaned under the unbearable strain of their battle, its ancient magic bending past its limits. Then came a cataclysmic explosion, a direct head-on clash of light and darkness that flung them both backward, separated by the violent power they had just unleashed. As they staggered to their feet, injured yet unbowed, the ground between them collapsed. A yawning pit of molten rage tore the battlefield in two, lava gushing upward, morphing the ruined landscape into an infernal scene, well suited to their final showdown. Voldemort's laughter rang out raw and euphoric, blending with the island's demise. "You've done well to keep up, Potter," he cried, voice thick with insanity, his scarlet eyes shining with a crazed light. "But I am immortal. Even if this island is destroyed, even if the world ends, I will live on. I'll rise again and again, forever. Can you claim the same?" Harry didn't retort with arrogance. He simply smiled, a slow, calculating smile that sent the first flicker of real unease crawling across Voldemort's face. The Dark Lord felt a cold hint of terror stir in his chest, an emotion he had rarely encountered. "Immortal, Tom?" Harry's voice was calm, nearly gentle, yet imbued with an unmistakable undercurrent of fearlessness. It soared above the raging storm, the lava surging around them, and the crumbling earth. "I believe," Harry continued, his emerald eyes locking on Voldemort's crimson ones without the slightest tremor, "it's time we talked about your Horcruxes, Tom." Voldemort's eyes widened. His pupil shrank. For the first time that night, amid the collapsing island, molten rivers, and electrified skies, genuine fear curled beneath Lord Voldemort's carefully built facade, as if his soul recognized its lethal vulnerability. Something hollow gaped in the place where fragments of his soul should have been. Chapter 364, Every Move, Every Fall. Horcruxes. Voldemort's voice, though touched with forced amusement, wavered. A crack appeared in the carefully constructed facade he had maintained for so long. His calm began to unravel, a subtle tremor betraying the unease gnawing at him from within. "Ah, the diary. Lucius. If he weren't dead already, he'd wish to be. He cut himself off, the life faltering mid-sentence, dying in his throat. His crimson eyes, once blazing with cold confidence, darted anxiously across the ruined landscape, searching for denial or escape. Yet all they found was Harry Potter, calm and unyielding, standing like an immovable force. The diary. Harry interrupted, his voice calm and almost dismissive. With a casual flick of Gryffindor's sword, he deflected a curling tendril of dark magic. The shadowy coil disintegrated into harmless wisps. That was just the appetizer, Tom. You didn't think I wouldn't figure out you made more than one, did you? Harry paused, as though sifting through a mental list. His eyes never left Voldemort's, every word landing with precise, calculated intent. Even Dumbledore suspected as much, so why wouldn't I? Let's see. He raised a finger, counting them off like it was a trivial task. Each Horcrux named was another blow to Voldemort's claims of immortality. There was the ring, of course. In the Gaunt Shack. A nasty curse on that one. It ended up killing Dumbledore, didn't it? Though, I destroyed the piece of your soul in it long before that. The mental picture of Dumbledore's shriveled hand and painful death flashed, a testament to that curse's potency. A burst of pure hatred erupted from Voldemort's wand. Raw, untamed dark magic potent enough to vaporize solid stone raced toward Harry. He sidestepped with effortless grace, letting the curse obliterate a rock formation behind him into glowing dust. He didn't so much as blink. The locket from the cave, Harry continued relentlessly. His sword sliced through Voldemort's next spell, reducing a bone-shattering curse to harmless sparks. That was the first Horcrux I got my hands on. Regulus Black retrieved it from that lovely and fury-filled lake as his final act of defiance. He sent it to the Black House via the Elf Express before he died, so I took care of the destruction for him. Harry's expression hardened further. Then there was the cup from Bellatrix's vault. Don't worry, Bella isn't dead. I merely subdued her, and Lord Black pulled a few strings to get me the cup. Each Horcrux mentioned was another nail in Voldemort's coffin. His carefully constructed sense of invulnerability fractured with every detail. Even the revelation that Bellatrix still lived, yet had failed to return to his side, struck him like a physical blow. Impossible! Voldemort hissed, his composure shattering like ice beneath a crushing weight. His voice rose in pitch, raw and frantic. The dark energy swirling around him, fed by the island's unnatural power, flared erratically, jerking, twisting, flailing, reflecting the turmoil roiling within him. Every calm, measured word from Harry tore into the Dark Lord's arrogance, peeling it away layer by layer, exposing the raw panic beneath. For the first time in decades, Voldemort the self-proclaimed immortal looked truly vulnerable. Ravenclaw's diadem, Harry continued, his voice steady. The purple lightning crackling around him flared brighter, a visible manifestation of his growing dominance. You left it in the room of requirement, which turned out to be the easiest Horcrux to access once I started school. I found the room in my first week, so, thanks for that. He paused, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I even used the diadem quite a lot, still do, actually. It's remarkably useful if you use it for learning instead of keeping fragments of your soul hidden. It helped me advance my magic faster, as you can probably tell from my current strength. Harry's tone dropped to a near whisper, soft yet cutting through the storm's howling wind and crashing waves like a knife. His next words carried the final blow. And then, of course, he said, his eyes gleaming, Nagini, in the graveyard. Voldemort froze, his entire body going rigid, breath catching in his throat. His already pale face seemed to drain of what little color remained, leaving it almost ghostly beneath its serpentine contours. The graveyard. He rasped, barely audible, his voice raw with disbelief and dawning horror. You were there that night? You killed Nagini? For a fleeting moment, silence reigned, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. The confirmation of his worst fear pierced him like a dagger. Harry's expression shifted subtly at first, then unmistakably. A wave of transformation washed over him. His emerald eyes flickered, then hardened into an electrifying shade of blue, cold and unrelenting. Surprised, Tom? He asked, his voice deepening, every word carrying a commanding authority that was wholly his own. Yes, Tom. I was the mysterious wizard who saved Charles that night. The one who obliterated your inner circle of Death Eaters. Voldemort's eyes widened in recognition, the name slipping from his lips in a fractured whisper. Blue eyes. His tone cracked under the weight of rage and disbelief. The Dark Lord's usual cold menace dissolved into something raw, something closer to fear. You're the one who disrupted my resurrection ceremony, the one who slaughtered my followers and saved Charles Potter. The same blue eyes I suspect to be behind the assassinations of my strongest supporters this past year. It has always been me, Harry confirmed, his smile cold and predatory, utterly devoid of warmth or mercy. It was the smile of a hunter who had finally cornered his prey. I've been there, unnoticed and unheard, every single time your oh-so-perfect plans crumbled to dust. Every grand design you hatched, reduced to rubble by me. I was the one who stopped you from taking the Philosopher's Stone, remember poor Quirrell? Messy business, that. I ended the Lestrange brothers, too. Those random vigilantes at the Quidditch World Cup? Me in disguise. And if you still haven't pieced it together from our little battle tonight, the knight who's been hunting your creatures, purging your darkness? Also me. Oh, and the vigilante who's been dismantling your forces over the past year? Every thorn in your side, every failed venture, every unexpected disaster? Always me, Tom. Every single time. These revelations didn't simply register in Voldemort's mind, they struck like physical blows, shattering his carefully constructed reality. His rigid sense of superiority crumbled, the illusion of invincibility splintering into countless fragments. One boy. He snarled, his voice cracking under the weight of the impossible truth. Wild denial clung to every word. Some teenager has been tearing down everything I've worked for, everything I've built for decades. All while attending school, in fact, Harry said lightly, a mocking grin curving his lips, the glint of cruelty unmistakable in his newly blue eyes. You focused on the wrong Potter, Tom. Obsessed over the wrong prophecy. You never noticed the real threat, the one standing right in front of you, observing, waiting, always ready. It was the final insult, the ultimate blow, a dagger driven deep into what remained of Voldemort's pride. Chapter 365, Fate's Final Clash. With an inhuman roar of pure, unrestrained rage, a sound that mirrored the island's death throes, Voldemort unleashed his full power. There was no longer any semblance of control, strategy, or even survival. It was raw, blinding fury, destruction for its own sake. The island's amplification magic, ancient, malevolent, answered his madness, feeding his frenzy, magnifying his spells into forces of cataclysmic annihilation. Harry met the onslaught head-on, a storm colliding with another. Light against darkness. Chaos against order. Destiny against desperation. Sword and wand moved in perfect, terrifying harmony, extensions of Harry's power, his intent, his will. The air ignited around them, shimmering, distorting, and combusting as their magic clashed. Reality itself frayed at the edges, straining under the unbearable weight of their combined power. Below them, the sea churned into a frothing maelstrom, twisted by the storm and their unleashed magic. Stray spells struck the ocean's surface, boiling vast swathes of water into clouds of scalding steam. The rising vapor mixed with black smoke and volcanic ash, turning the landscape into a swirling miasma of chaos and destruction. They fought above the disintegrating island, two gods of war locked in a final, desperate struggle, neither touching the crumbling ground. Their magic and sheer will kept them aloft, suspended above the abyss. Every clash sent shockwaves rippling outward, distorting the water's surface and triggering seismic tremors that splintered the dissolving rock below. The very elements bent to their will, fire erupted in columns, lightning crackled and danced between them, wind howled in spiraling tempests. Even darkness itself seemed to twist and solidify, obeying their thoughts, reshaping the world in their image. It was no longer a battle. It was the end of an era, an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object, tearing the world apart around them. Then Voldemort, consumed by blinding, all-devouring rage, unleashed his signature curse, the ultimate expression of his dark mastery. The incantation synonymous with terror, with death, with his very name. Avada Kedavra. The sickly green light of the killing curse, the color of poisoned emeralds, of festering decay, of absolute oblivion, ripped through the apocalyptic chaos. It illuminated the swirling smoke and molten lava in an eerie, ghostly glow, painting the battlefield in hues of death and finality. Harry watched the jet of lethal green magic hurtling toward him. In that fleeting second, a flicker of déjà vu stirred a ghost of memory, an echo from another timeline, another battle, another ending. His mind flashed with fragments of a life not lived. Instinct took over. The instinct honed by countless battles, by years of relentless training, by the ingrained knowledge of paths not taken. His right hand, gripping the Elder Wand, moved almost unconsciously, reacting faster than thought, faster than fear. The urge to cast Expelliarmus flared. The disarming charm. The signature spell of the other Harry, the Canon Harry. For the briefest moment, it felt as though fate itself demanded he cast that spell, to carve out the iconic moment once again. But Harry Hadrian Ignotus Potter rebelled. A scream of defiance echoed in his mind. No. Not him. Not me. He was not the weak, hopeful boy from Canon. He had long since shed that identity. He rarely used Expelliarmus now, refusing to let that spell define him. He would fight this battle on his terms. He would end this battle with his strength. With all his will and power, he cast the spell that had become his signature, one born of lightning and fury. Fulgur Lanza. A spear of pure lightning erupted from the Elder Wand, a concentrated lance of blinding energy that crackled with raw power. It tore through the air, illuminating the darkness with the light of a contained storm. It met the sickly green jet of the killing curse in mid-air. The collision erupted in a soundless explosion of light and raw energy, violent and unstoppable. The world seemed to hold its breath as arcs of lightning split the sky, twisting and lashing out with a fury of their own, bending reality around their clash. The two spells collided, locked in an invisible struggle, a battle of wills fought on the ethereal plane of magic. A clash of destinies, played out in a single, incandescent moment. The intersection point shimmered and crackled with raw, untamed energy. A swirling vortex of pure magic, where light and darkness wrestled for dominance. Life and death hung precariously in the balance. For a breathless, timeless instant, they remained locked, two beams of light, purple and green, frozen in eternal combat. It was a visual manifestation of the war itself, the fate of the wizarding world suspended between them. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the purple light began to push back. To advance. To surge forward with unstoppable momentum. It overwhelmed the sickly green, pushing it back, consuming it, devouring it in a tide of righteous power. The green of the killing curse flickered, faltered, weakened. Its malevolent energy dissipated, dissolving, fading into insignificance against the relentless force of Harry's spell. And then, with a final, agonizing shriek, a sound that echoed the death throes of the island itself, the killing curse shattered. The death spell, however, did not disappear. Its malevolent energy was consumed by the relentless force of Harry's magic, absorbed and transformed, feeding the already devastating spell and making it stronger, deadlier. The purple beam, now unopposed, surged forward. A lance of pure magical energy, striking Voldemort full in the chest with the force of a physical blow. An impact that resonated through the very air, through the very island. The Dark Lord's crimson eyes widened. Pupils dilated in shock, in disbelief, in a dawning, horrifying realization. A flicker of understanding, of bitter, ironic comprehension, dawned in their depths. He recognized the impossible, the unthinkable. He, Lord Voldemort, the most powerful Dark Lord of all time, was being defeated. Defeated by the very boy he had sought to destroy. The boy he had underestimated. The boy who had become his ultimate nemesis. A silent scream tore from Voldemort's lips, a soundless cry of anguish and despair. His body convulsed, twisting into unnatural angles as the magic ripped through him. The lightning consumed him from within, while the devoured death curse did its work, tearing apart the fragile remnants of his shattered soul. The dark magic that had sustained him for so long unraveled. His form, already a grotesque parody of life, began to disintegrate. His wand fell from numb fingers, clattering against the crumbling rock before vanishing into the abyss. His body lost its form, its substance, dissolving into dust even as he fell. Voldemort's lifeless body plummeted, a ragdoll of decaying flesh and bone, into the fiery chasm that had split the island's heart. He disappeared into the molten lava below with a final, hissing splash, a sound quickly swallowed by the roaring flames and crashing waves. The lava churned and roared, consuming him, erasing him. Burning away the last vestiges of Lord Voldemort, of Tom Marvolo Riddle, until nothing remained. The Dark Lord who had once terrorized the wizarding world was reduced to ashes, to memory, to nothingness. Harry stood on the edge of the crumbling island, his breath steady despite the raging chaos around him. The wind whipped through his hair, the salty spray of the sea stinging his face. He watched in silence as the lava glowed and the island shuddered in its final death throes, sinking beneath the waves. With it went the ruins of the manor, the echoes of battle, the ashes of Voldemort, and the weight of a world finally, truly free. The fight was over. The war was won. The prophecy, in its own twisted, unexpected way, had been fulfilled. As dawn broke over the horizon, the iron-grey sky softened to hues of rose and pale gold. Hadrian Potter, the boy who was not supposed to be the hero, the knight who had risen from the shadows, the wizard who had defied fate and forged his own destiny, stood alone above the ruins of Grindelwald's Isle. The rising sun cast his shadow, long and solitary, across the turbulent waters below. The world was safe. For now, at least. The darkness had been pushed back. Banished. Extinguished. And now, finally, it was time to go home. Chapter 366, Epilogue, A New Dawn. The gates of Black Castle stood tall and imposing, their ancient stone walls casting long, dark silhouettes across the fading evening light. A small group had gathered outside, eyes fixed on the gates, their hearts heavy with unspoken worry. At the front, Arcturus Black stood stoic, his expression carefully neutral, though his tightly clasped hands betrayed his tension. Beside him, Sirius paced restlessly, his usual roguish grin replaced by an anxious frown. Amelia Bones, Emma, Fleur, and the ever-stern Cordelia stood nearby, concern etched into every line of their faces. The air was thick with tension, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional murmur of hope. They had been waiting for hours, scanning the darkening horizon for any sign of Harry. No one knew where he had gone, only that he had set off alone to hunt Voldemort. Whether he had found him, or was locked in a final battle, remained a mystery. Harry had told no one about his plan for the confrontation. Then, a low rumble vibrated through the sky, deep and resonant. Head snapped upward, eyes widening as a familiar silhouette cut through the clouds, a massive thunderbird, its wings crackling with arcs of lightning. A collective gasp rippled through the group. Relief bloomed on their faces as the majestic creature descended, its vast wings folding neatly as it landed just outside the gates. The thunderbird's shimmering form shifted and shrank, revealing Harry standing tall, his clothing torn and singed, but his eyes glowing with quiet triumph. A surge of raw, overwhelming relief swept through the crowd. Sirius let out a whoop of pure delight, rushing forward to clap Harry's shoulder with both hands. "You showy drama queen! Couldn't just apparate here, could you?" Harry's lips curved into a grin, mischief sparking in his eyes, adding light to the fading twilight. "Where's the fun in that?" The crowd pressed in closer, voices overlapping in a rush of questions and exclamations. Before anyone could say more, Cordelia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the noise like a honed blade. "Hadrian!" she snapped, her tone sharp and commanding. "Not another word. Not one more syllable. You're getting a full checkup now. No arguments." Harry barely had time to blink before Cordelia seized his arm and began marching him toward the castle, her no-nonsense attitude brooking no resistance. Amelia, Emma, and Fleur followed close behind, their expressions hovering somewhere between fierce concern and immense relief. Sirius and Arcturus exchanged wry glances, familiar with Cordelia's unstoppable nature. Arcturus chuckled softly, while Sirius crossed his arms and watched his godson disappear into the castle. A room was converted into a makeshift infirmary in no time. Cordelia took command immediately, her wand flashing as she cast diagnostic spells with practiced precision. Emma stood nearby, scribbling notes into her notebook with a furrowed brow, while Fleur assisted with swift, deft movements. Sirius tried to slip in, but Cordelia's icy stare stopped him cold. "Out!" she barked, and he sheepishly retreated. Harry watched the flurry of activity with a faint smile, his heart warmed by their concern. He didn't mind the fuss. After everything, it was comforting to see the worry on their faces slowly melt into relief. Finally, Cordelia straightened, an audible pop echoing from her joints. "All right, Harry," she said, her sharp tone softened just slightly by approval. "You're surprisingly sound, considering what you've been through these past 2 days." Emma, her notebook now brimming with notes, nodded briskly. "First, a restorative potion and a nutrient draft. Then a full night's sleep. We'll check you again in the morning." With the immediate medical issues addressed, Cordelia reluctantly allowed Arcturus, Sirius, and Amelia into the room. They gathered around Harry, relief mingling with curiosity in their eyes. "So what happened?" Sirius asked, his usual bravado muted. "Tell us everything." Harry had a different idea. "Myra," he called. The smiling house elf appeared with a sharp pop. "Could you bring Arcturus's pensieve, please?" Myra returned moments later, cradling the ancient silver basin in her hands. Once it was ready, Harry raised his wand to his temple and pulled a shimmering strand of memory free, dropping it into the swirling liquid. It's easier if I just show you, he said. One by one, they leaned in, their fingers touching the Pensieve's shimmering surface. The room dissolved around them, replaced by the desolate, hellish landscape of Grindelwald's island. They saw everything. The initial, earth-shattering clash of magic. The utter destruction of the ancient manor. Voldemort's horrifying transformation, his body twisting and warping, fueled by the island's dark, ancient power. They watched as Harry fought with breathtaking skill, his every move precise, deadly, and relentless, a whirlwind of light and lethal intent. Gasps punctuated the silence. Fla's fingers tightened around Harry's arm, her grip nearly painful. Emma's wide eyes reflected a mix of terror and fascination, while even Cordelia, hardened by decades of experience, observed the memory with grim, tight-lipped focus. Sirius, unable to contain himself, let out a cheer at Harry's most spectacular moves, earning him several sharp glares from Cordelia. Arcturus, ever the strategist, watched with cold precision, offering clipped observations. "You've surpassed even your great-grandfather, Harry," Arcturus muttered, his gaze never leaving the swirling memory, voice tinged with something between pride and awe. And then, they reached the end. The killing curse, a venomous jet of sickly green light. Harry's counterspell, a spear of violet lightning, crackling with unstoppable power. They saw the collision, a cataclysmic clash of light and darkness, the air itself fracturing around the impact. The agonizing, soul-rending shriek as Voldemort's own magic turned on him. The sight of the Dark Lord's body unraveling, disintegrating into ash, and plummeting into the island's fiery chasm. When they exited the Pensieve, the room was wrapped in hush. Relief and awe merged with a faint sense of disbelief. Sirius found his voice first, lowered and edged with reverence. "Bloody hell, Harry," he whispered, shaking his head. You really did it. You ended him." Sensing the shift in mood, the house elves had preemptively arranged a celebration. Tables appeared, packed with food and drink, the air filling with warm scents of roasted meats, fresh bread, and sweet pastries. Still, the celebratory feel was mellowed by a deep awareness of what had happened, what had been secured, and what might yet loom ahead. Yes, the war was over, but the world was never simple. Never free of peril. After an initial wave of relief and muted rejoicing, Amelia Bones, her features newly serious, turned to Harry. "So, what now?" she asked quietly, her tone direct. "Voldemort is gone, but what's next?" Harry nodded, already thinking ahead. "I have a plan," he said. "But I need all of you to decide if we go through with it." Taking a breath, he delivered his idea. "We hide Voldemort's death," he said, voice firm and unwavering. "Let the world think he's still alive. Plotting. Waiting for the right time to strike." A stunned silence settled. "What?" Sirius exploded, outrage and disbelief mingling in his voice. "That's mad. Why on earth would we do that?" "Because," Harry explained, his gaze sweeping over them, "fear is a powerful motivator. The Ministry is a mess, corrupt and inefficient. The public is complacent, easily swayed. If we announce Voldemort's demise, everyone will relax. They'll fall back into complacency, just like after the last war." His voice grew stronger, more resolute. "But if they believe he's still out there, we can use that fear to push real change. To elect Amelia as minister. To overhaul the Auror department. To purge the corruption that festers in the Ministry. To suppress the extremists on both sides and forge a stronger, more just, more resilient wizarding world." Another silence, longer this time, filled with the weight of his words. The crackling of the fire in the hearth seemed unusually loud. Then, Arcturus Black, his eyes gleaming with a shrewd, calculating light, nodded slowly. "He's correct," he stated, his voice raspy but carrying an undeniable authority. "It's a risk, a big one, but it might be our only chance. Announcing Voldemort's demise will only result in stagnation. Complacency. A return to the same old, flawed ways." Sirius, always itching for a fight, folded quickly. "Count me in," he said, a fiery glint reappearing in his eyes. "Time to scare everyone into doing the right thing for once." Fleur, Emma, and Cordelia exchanged hesitant glances before nodding. The logic was undeniable, the potential for change impossible to ignore. Amelia, however, hesitated. "It's deceptive, Harry," she said, quiet disapproval woven through her words. "Tricking the public, manipulating their fear, it feels morally wrong." Harry nodded. I understand your reservations. That's why I'm leaving the decision to all of you. Yes, it's manipulative. It's not unlike how Dumbledore operated. But if we want real change, we need drastic measures. Fear drives change more than anything else. They debated at length, refining the idea and establishing guidelines. Harry's calm conviction and carefully thought-out assurances eventually persuaded Amelia. The burden of responsibility and the potential for lasting, positive reform tipped the scales. With the decision made, they launched into discussing specifics. Ideas were proposed, argued, and refined into a workable plan. A blueprint for the future of Wizarding Britain was forged that night within the walls of Black Castle, fueled by a potent blend of fear, hope, and an unwavering determination to create a better world. The plan unfolded with remarkable speed and precision. Amelia Bones, bolstered by the formidable influence of the Black and Potter families, was elected Minister for Magic. Harry, as Lord Potter, attended the Wizengamot session in silent support. His mere presence, his quiet power was enough to sway the vote. The public, still traumatized by the Ministry attack and terrified of Voldemort's supposed continued existence, eagerly embraced the change in leadership. After the session, Harry returned to Hogwarts for the final days of his 7th year. It was a surreal, almost dreamlike experience. He was no longer merely a student, he was a living legend. An icon. A silent savior. Everywhere he went, he was met with a mixture of awe, fear, and whispered speculation. He ignored it all, choosing instead to focus on spending his remaining time at Hogwarts with his friends, cherishing the familiar routines, the comforting normalcy of school life. Before the graduation ceremony, a funeral was held for Dumbledore. It was a grand, elaborate affair, staged on the Hogwarts grounds, attended by a vast throng of witches and wizards from every corner of the magical world. The tombstone, the inscription, the ceremony itself all mirrored the events of the original timeline. Despite the revelations of his manipulations, Dumbledore's reputation remained largely intact. To most, he was still a hero, a flawed leader, perhaps, but one who had stood against the darkness. Harry attended the funeral briefly before quietly slipped away, leaving the crowds to their grief and their memories. The graduation ceremony was a grand affair, but Harry's mind was elsewhere. As he received his diploma, he couldn't help but think about the future. What came next? A life with Fleur, perhaps. A family. And always, the pursuit of magic. His unquenchable thirst for arcane knowledge and mastery. He knew that peace was a fleeting illusion. That the threat of war, whether from a homegrown Dark Lord, a foreign power, or even the Muggle world, was ever present. He knew that the statute of secrecy, already stretched thin, would inevitably shatter. And when that day arrived, he knew there would be conflict. A war that would dwarf anything the wizarding world had ever witnessed. But as he heard the cheers of his graduating class resonating through the Great Hall, he pushed those somber thoughts aside. There would be ample time for worry, for preparation, for battle. For now, he would live. He would love. He would learn. He would savor the fragile peace he had fought so fiercely to achieve. He had earned it. And when the time came, when the darkness inevitably rose again, he would be ready. He would stand against it, a beacon of defiance, a shield against the storm. A wizard, a knight, a protector of his world. And perhaps, when the time came, he would be powerful enough to end the war with a flick of his wrist. A mere whisper of a spell. The end.
Thanks for listening.